economy. You better watch out if your enemy's a road ahead of full prophecy to be the greatest beast the world has ever seen. I feed him every day like the bones clean. I feed him all the hate and he grows me, and he gets caused real big, pissed off quick. And if you cross him, you might drop dead. Metaphorically, of course, settling the score, never getting bored. Loves of blood and gold, always wanting more freedom from the source. They don't really listen until they feel the force of blood in. If you start shit, you'll be heartless in the darkness. Torn apart quick, you left scars ripped, you'll be chewed up and discarded. And this world ain't right, won't accept it. Negative energy, I expect it. Once it's in your mind, it's infectious. So fight for your life and reject it. You better give me space, I'm protective. My adrenaline spikes when I'm threatened. And if you stay in my way, I'm aggressive. Cause when there's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate. There's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate.
1 2 1 2. Polly picked a pack of peppers. Jimmy jumped Jerry in a... I don't know. I ran out of rhymes. Ooh, man, that is really bad delay on my camera. Really bad delay. Okay. I'm checking. Peppers. Jimmy jumped. Hey, Selah, I'm here. I'm just doing some audio changes and some changes to my screen. There seems to be really a bad delay, though, on my camera, though. Like, my lips aren't even matching my words. Hey, Santiago. Okay. Let me see if I have a delay set up or something. Audio off. Okay, let's take that off. All right, let's try this again. Global settings. Okay. How's that? It's still really badly delayed. I don't know why. All right, for you guys, are my words matching my lips? And how's the sound? Let me know in the chat, guys, how things are going. How does that look to you all? I got a bad delay on this side. I'm going to turn on auto ducking. Let me know what you guys think. See how it works. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Is that any better? All right, let's go to watch along. Okay. All right, I'm going to hit some video real quick. Let's see what happens here. I might just have to live with a delay for a while until I can fix that part.
Maybe that's just like what I assumed. I was like, yeah, he's like really has problems with sexual control. It's not that he meant to like hurt this other person. I mean, the recording stuff without people's consent is really bad, but to him, these people.
Their audio seems good on that end. My audio seems really badly delayed. Okay, let me see what's going on here.
People are Discord bunnies and like, you know, whatever. Maybe it's bad to dehumanize people because of their relation to you within like a certain social ecosystem. But, you know, he's got millions of followers, right? Like he's emperor of his little.
Okay, so I have no idea what to do to fix my audio delay, but at least we have audio again that's not screeching or echoing incredibly bad. Let me see here if I can fix any of this. Oh my gosh, what? Buffering, disable buffering. Okay, how's that? Faster? Okay, let's see. Elgato virtual cam. No, I want the actual pro cam. Okay, let's see. Okay. The fuck is this? That's a look. Woo. Display capture. Okay, that's the frame. Okay, let me fix that. Let's see. Virtual cam, okay. And display. Let's see. Auto Facecam Pro. Figure. Okay. Now let's see. There we go. All right. So now we're synced up. Our lips are now syncing. Let's see how the sound is. See if we still got good sound. Or if I messed that up.
Castle. It's a bit like, you know, when people expect, you know, Elon Musk or Louis the 14th to expect to have the sexual rules around their behavior that somebody else would have around their behavior. It's like, bro, like it doesn't work that way. It's actually interesting that I think his arousal patterns are the most subversive thing about him, not that he's a sex maniac given his position.
Sorry, she's being really difficult again. To me, this feels like, if anything, a low-grade market correction. He did something not nice, you know, by sharing.
You guys couldn't hear anything I just said. Let me do that again. I'm going to hit intermission, be right back, and ending soon. We're not stopping. I'm just cycling through to make sure everything's working. God. Oh my gosh. Let's fix that. Why am I so big? Here we go. Okay, there we go. Intermission. Right there. There we go. All right. I don't know what to do with the new followers thing, but I'll figure out. Maybe I'll relabel it something in the future. Okay. That looks good. Okay. Let's cycle through. Okay. All right. That looks good. That looks good. Oh, and we can now do, supposedly, we can now do guest chats, collab cams. I don't have any collab cams on here, so nobody try. But I just downloaded the software for Streamlabs for the collab cam to work. I have not played with it at all. We're not going to try that today. We're just getting things to work. Okay, let's make sure we have audio on this.
Sharing something he shouldn't have shared. And now he's getting heat for it. And I don't really see that as, groundbreaking. And it's nice to see that happening. To me, it doesn't feel like, a leftist cancellation. It doesn't feel like any sort of witch hunt. It just feels like a lot of people being like, oh, that's not cool. And it being scandalous enough for some people to talk about it because it's salacious. But it feels fairly grounded. And I like that.
You like this scandal because it's just so benign?
Yeah, just kind of like, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's not nice. Kind of, how when our kids do things that we don't think they should do, we're like, hey, this is not a very nice thing to do, and here's why. We might make fun of them for a bit about it, and then you just kind of move on.
Well, I appreciate you talking through this with me, Simone, because I thought this was an interesting scandal from my perspective, mostly in terms of the feelings that it elicited within me. And I wonder if other people have felt the same way about this scandal, or if I'm unique. As you said, like maybe most people feel the same way about the Neil Gaiman stuff as this. I was just going over the Neil Gaiman stuff, and I was like, this is like regular like BDSM stuff. Like, if bro's a celebrity, like of course he's gonna. If people consent, they consent. Like, yeah. I need clear lack of consent for me to be upset about this.
Yeah.
Anyway, of course, my overarching moral
I think
is
working
people
there.
should be focused on something more important with their time and their lives. That's what I would say more broadly, but they don't ascribe to my religious beliefs. So, like,
well, but I guess similar issue with the Destiny thing. All the quote unquote victims are people who may have been exchanging intimacy for access to a circle or some kind of platform.
Oh, of course they were.
And
there
so are they really victims? Kind of,
right.
What do you expect? You're playing in this world. You're doing this because you kind of expect something.
Okay, people in the
have,
chat,
like,
what do you think?
And stuff, and some of them, like, it's so gross. Like,
well, but like, who cares? It doesn't matter if it's gross or not. It's just that, like, if you're going to play it fast and loose sexually, stuff like this happen. It sounds like victim blaming, but like,
No, I don't disagree. I do not think it's victim.
So if we're good, I'm going to change the title. I'll take an intermission and we'll do a show. Let me know what you guys think. If it's a yes or a no. If it's a yes, it's a go, and we're going to try it out. Let me know what you think. Let me do a poll. see what we got. I'll be right back, guys.
Got a monster inside of me. You better watch out if your enemy's a road ahead of full prophecy to be the greatest beast the world has ever seen. I feed him every day like the bones clean. I feed him all the hate and he grows me. And he gets caused real big, pissed off quick. And if you cross him, you might drop dead. Metaphorically, of course, settling the score. Never getting bored, loves the blood and gore. Always wanting more, feeding from the source. They don't really listen until they feel it for their heart in. If you start shit, you be heartless in the darkness. Torn apart quick, you left scars ripped. You be chewed up and discarded. And this world ain't right, won't accept it. Negative energy, I expect it. Once it's in your mind, it's infectious. So fight for your life and reject it. You better give me space, I'm protective. My adrenaline spikes when I'm threatened. And if you stay in my way, I'm aggressive. Cause when there's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate. There's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate. Negative energy, I expect it. Once it's in your mind, it's infectious. So fight for your life and reject it. You better give me space, I'm protective. My adrenaline spikes when I'm threatened. And if you stay in my way, I'm aggressive. Cause when there's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate.
Alright, let's do it.
There's no exit, I'll kill when I'm desperate.
What's up? Don't hate. It's my new jam. We're no longer going to be a religious channel. We're going to be a DJ channel. DJing all night, all day. Today we have Garmania from the great state of... And he is doing great today. The baddest, the awesome. Your hot cup of coffee in the late evening. This is Hot 95.4 7000. Yes, yes. Cancer to the ears is our name. Yes, this is the greatest. This is the best. This is everything it's ever wanted to be. What's up, Gar? All right, let's put on some better music for you. I don't want you to get hurt. Here we go. This song's going out to all my atheists out there. I just want you to know it's not too late.
I remember you and me, and how careless we could be.
All day and all night, we'd stay up, it felt so right. We were so young, we were so dumb.
I don't know what this is. We're going to watch it.
Is a pilgrimage organization run by some friends of mine I met. Rauser had several awesome experiences on the Camino de Santiago with his
We should just
family
keep the
and
music
friends.
playing throughout
So,
the thing.
He is taking trips this spring and summer for those who want to join him and his wife. They offer different packages.
That's just a weird
Piece that's been
advertisement.
televised doing a debate on indulgences. I think the only other person, and it was again with James White, was probably about 40 years ago.
Yo, 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 it's better with James White. James White is the old king again. The old king sling. James White, the rock king.
And that was, I forgot his name now, but he's an American theologian.
Rap.
So yeah,
I rap.
that's certainly the
Hip hop,
only
hip, hip,
formal
hip, hip,
debates
hip,
on
hip hop.
indulgences. And we did that in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, which you couldn't have done 20 years ago.
Where I was responding to Gavin Ortland's fallible list of infallible books on YouTube. I shared the video on Facebook, and a bunch of people commented underneath it, and your comment stood out to me as being a very it's a fundamental hard-hitting point that you were making. And the second thing is, it sounded remarkably similar to something that I had been making in the video. So we independently came up with, I think, what are similar positions. We might disagree or differ here and there, but I've also heard other Catholic apologists and theologians mention the same point after I gave my video.
So yeah, I am working on a video reviewing Gavin Ortland's latest book. I was going to do a review of Dan McKellen's book, but the coward doesn't have it available in audiobook yet. He's too scared of what my review is going to be. He's worried he's going to lose all credibility. That's all that it is. It has nothing to do with time or scheduling. It's just he's fearful of my review. That's why he's not releasing the audiobook yet. Yeah, we all know. We all know, Dan, you're scared of the Catholic from Texas. Okay, let's get to this one. Much later. Oh, I heard an announcement. I didn't see anything. What's going on here? No, I haven't been drinking. I just realized my self-worth, okay? I realized that I'm better than everyone on the internet and that everyone should be listening to me.
The theological method and so forth. I think that's something sometimes evangelicals have lost somewhat. And so
I'm not drinking, Gar. All I'm saying is that you're cute. That's all I'm saying.
those would be two examples. I
Drinking water.
really mean it when I say I have no personal animus against Eastern Orthodoxy, and I learn a lot from Eastern Orthodox
Look what I bought today.
theology, and I admire a lot of the people in this tradition as well. So, as you were just talking a moment ago about, being a Protestant and these dialogues, and I was thinking,
you are cute mania.
not to ramble on.
You're no longer Gar mania. You're now cute mania. You're no longer Gur mania. You're now cute mania.
Here, but we have a historic opportunity in the way we conduct these conversations, because 200 years ago, or even 15, we didn't have the ability to talk this much. And so the word healing actually comes up in my mind as something that you hope is happening a little bit, even amidst the wrangling. And we can talk and we'll argue through our differences and all that, but to do it so in a way that Christ is
I did review it, and no one watched it. It's like my third lowest video. I'm not even kidding. It's like number 3 or number 4 of my lowest watched videos of all time. No one watched my Dr. Josh's book review. I read the whole thing. I read it in less than a week for you guys.
honored is a happy thing. I try to do that. I know I'm not
We'll
perfect,
do some Randal Rauser in a little bit.
but yeah, I have tremendous respect for Eastern
And
Orthodoxy.
some Dan
the whole tradition.
McKellen, some Dan Mickey.
Nice. That's really, really high praise.
You want me to watch my video reviewing my video? Is that what you want, Gar? Is that what you want? Because I'll do it. I'll go meta on your ass. I had 2 days of bad audio. I had to take down 2 live streams. Oh, now that you're not a creator, now that you're an audience member, now your attention span doesn't work? I see how it is. I see how it is. Now that Twitch is over, TikTok is over for you.
there. Father, I mean, you you might as well come. Father might send you an invite to come visit his parish after that
I did a video on the book. I'm telling you.
one.
I have it right there.
There's an Eastern Orthodox church here in
And
Nashville.
I might
visited. It's amazing.
accept it after that one. But you know, there's
The short version was it was a good book. It was there was nothing shocking in there, nothing new. It was worth the read, but the fact that evangelicals and Protestants have a problem on it. I did a video, Gar Mania from Garistan. You know, if you had never left YouTube, there would be like 5 stations that don't exist right now. Pixie has a station, actually more. BS is now actually making videos for once. Danny went on to be semi-famous and then disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't know what happened to the other guy. Yeah, so I mean,
there's a tendency
my channel now does live streams thanks to you.
amongst a lot of Orthodox Christians, especially those that come from a Protestant background, to have kind of a baby with the bathwater reaction.
Oh, let's go to Randal. This is kind of boring. Let's go to
place
Dan
they
and then
came from.
Randal.
And quite often, we priests will remind
McKellen.
those coming from wherever they come from.
Dan McKellen,
Is that
the
has
Mormon.
formed you to the point where you are today. So, I mean, there is something that we take away from all of our experiences. And if we were to say, oh God, I wish I never had was a Calvinist, or I wish I never was a Roman Catholic, is to take those things out of your life that have brought you to where you are today. I will say, and this is something that a lot of people don't know about me, that in some very formative years, from the end of my 9th grade through
All right.
first
universe, but there's this old
So for those that don't know, the greatest vice president of all time is a Catholic. So we are going to critique the Catholic president as a Catholic. That's what we're doing today in honor of Gar Mania, who's just come out as a Christian. Thank you, Gar, for becoming a Christian. We really appreciate you. You can start teething at any point. We appreciate your teething and your seed giving. If you can please hit the super chat. Every super chat you donate is going to be an extra $1,000 in your life, 30 years in the future. Monopoly money, but still money. Okay? So if you could, just plant your seed right now, Gar, and it will sprout into success. That girl who has been rejecting you every night, you know, your wife, just plant the seed right now. And within a few months, she will forgive you. Between now, I'm getting a prediction right now. If you plant a seed of $100 right now, your wife will forgive you in the next month, within the next month.
old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way.
All right, let's.
Word. Very Christian concepts. Did you know that without religion, you guys wouldn't even have morality? And that without God, you guys would just be like having orgies? Like, it's totally awesome that like Christianity was created just to make people moral. With before Christianity, there was no morality. It's real amazing.
See it.
You love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your
All right, cool. Have a good one, Gar. It was good seeing you. Miss you, buddy.
community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world.
So this is a Christian concept in the sense that Christian nationalists commonly use it as a rhetorical smokescreen for their bigotry. However, it is both inaccurate and insincere. It's inaccurate because it purports to be Augustine's Ordo Amoris, order of love, or St. Thomas Aquinas's order of charity, but it is neither. It is actually what both describe as the natural order that is supposed to be subordinated to the order of love or the order of charity. See, for both men, you're supposed to love God and love your neighbor. And within the category of neighbor, they don't distinguish hierarchies. You love everyone. Now, both men also recognize that there is a natural intuitive impulse to prioritize proximity and to love those you are closest to and that you are around the most. And they recognize and they acknowledge that. But they also subordinate that natural order to the order of love or the order of charity, which requires that you love everyone. And both of them talk about how if you love those closest to you to the exclusion, to the harm, to the marginalization of those further away, then that natural order is disordered and it violates the order of love and the order of charity. Both of them say that you cannot do that. Augustine wants you to love all so that all can come to love God, and he recognizes that you cannot equally distribute your love to everyone on earth, but he suggests that you hierarchize things according to the accident of proximity.
Hey, that's not a real
if
word.
we go into on-Christian
Dan
doctrine,
made up a word. Hierarchizing. It's not a word. It's hierarchy. Okay? I know you went to a college and you learned book reading, but you're just wrong on this one.
we see at the bottom of this page, all other men are to be loved equally. But since you cannot be of assistance to everyone, those especially are to be cared for who are most closely bound to you by place, time, or opportunity, as if by chance. Thus, suppose you had an abundance of something which it would be well to give to someone else who lacked it, but you could not give it to two. If two came to you, of whom neither took precedence either in need or in any special connection with you, you could do nothing more just than to decide by lot which one should be given that which you could not give to both. Thus, in the same way among men, not all of whom you can care for, you must consider as if selected by lot, each one as he is able to be more closely associated with you in time. So, in other words, you don't have...
Dan, I like the guy you're reading, and I like you, but that was boring.
These ideological categories that you put on people you don't know, and then you order your love based on those ideological categories. You love the people you come into contact with, whether...
I mean, considering you reject univocality, considering you reject univocality, and you don't know how to read the Bible in context, I don't know. Maybe you're just not good at reading. Maybe you're just misunderstanding everything that... Was it Augustine? Everything that Augustine said.
Undocumented immigrants or not, you do not...
Lady Jane, was that Augustine? Yo, Joe, it was St. Augustine that said that. Oh, thank you, Lady Jane. I didn't realize you were a theologian. Lady Jane, you shaved your head. Why? G.I. Jane was an inspiration for me. Okay.
Love the native citizen in your town that you do not know more than the undocumented immigrant in your town that you do not know. That is disordered natural love, according to Augustine, and that results in sin and disharmony. Now, for Aquinas, the goal is not necessarily just so that love of God increases. Aquinas talks about the common good and social order, and again says that you should not disorder your natural affections. If love of someone close to you results in neglect for someone at a distance from you, then that love is disordered. So this is misrepresenting the ordo amoris, the order of charity. It is pretending to be that, but really what it's doing is inverting the natural order over and above the order of love and the order of charity in order to make it seem like they are authorized to neglect the person at a distance from them. But that brings up the other issue, that it is also insincere. Because, as JD Vance has demonstrated numerous times over in his political career, he is more than happy to neglect the people in his own community. Because he, in accordance with right-wing authoritarian and social dominance orient...
Whoa. First off, JD Vance is greatest Catholic vice president of all time. Mind you, there's not a large selection of them, but he's definitely better than Biden. Okay. Number two. As a right-wing authoritarian, basically meaning I'm a Republican, I disagree with your take on this. A lot of Hispanics are Republican. A lot of Hispanics are immigrants. We don't hate immigrants just because we like to have order. You are going through a fallacy, my friend. You're ideologically possessed right now. Cool it down.
Identity politics opposes programs that support the poor and the vulnerable and the...
No. So Catholics, also a conservative bunch, although a lot of them do vote Democrat. Christians as a whole, conservative but bunch, and they do mostly vote, Republican. Both donate to charities and give to the poor and donate time. It's kind of a whole trope with Christians. So again, you're putting political ideology in front of reality.
needy, whether that's because of socioeconomics, whether that's because of race, whether that's because of ideology, sexual identity, all those things. There are plenty.
Who are you defining as needy? Because I'm defining the homeless and the hungry as needy, not the spoiled and pampered.
Plenty of times where JD Vance has advocated for neglecting the people that are close to him because they don't support his ideologies, which is a flagrant violation of both the Ordo Amoris as well as the Order of Charity. Vance is not suggesting we can't take care of others until we take care of our own, because Vance is not interested in taking care of our own. If he were, then we would have a much more robust social safety net. We would not be...
I don't agree with that, and the Catholic Church doesn't agree with that either. And the Catholic Church is very much pro-social programs and pro... social welfare? What do we call it in the Catholic Church? It isn't social welfare. It's social something. Social justice. Catholic Church is very much social justice.
Marginalizing and minoritizing and oppressing groups based on sexual orientation or sexual identity or things like that. We would actually be...
Sounds like you're focusing in on one issue when JD Vance is talking about a larger issue. By the way, I'm not defending JD Vance here. I'm just talking about your fallacies in this little section here. We'll get into my opinion on JD Vance as this video rolls on. But you're doing fallacies, my friend. You should know better than that.
Taking care of our own. But right-wing authoritarianism is not particularly adept at doing that. What they are adept at is rhetorical prophylaxis for their bigotry, which is exactly what...
So oral condoms, they're really good at oral condoms. Dental dams, you're calling JD Vance's take on a Christian concept, a dental dam.
What Vance is doing here.
A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
So,
no, JD Vance has a very actually safe point there. That's an honest opinion. Here's the problem. JD Vance is also Catholic, and the Catholic Church has rulings concerning these kind of things, and JD Vance is technically in, actually, I think Santiago's already talking about it, but he's technically in rebellion against the Catholic Church by saying what he's saying, because the Catholic Church has official interpretations of these very topics, and we are actually ordered by the Pope to care for the homeless and to care for the immigrant. And churches, where I happen to live, actually shelter immigrants and go to court. So there's a legal section of the Catholic Church, and that's what I had to deal with for me and my wife's marriage, which still hasn't been granted, by the way. And there's a section, there's 3 sections for immigrants, and there's one section for the marriage stuff. The 3 sections for immigrants, you go there, you don't have a lawyer, you don't have a way to protect yourself. The church has a lawyer that they get, and they get resources to immigrants and to homeless people. And that's what they do. And they actually have an office. The Basilica itself has an office to do this. So JD Vance is directly violating and going against Catholic doctrine here. Not dogma, Dan. You get that wrong all the time. Not dogma, but he's going against Catholic doctrine. Santiago says, one thing I do have a concern with is American Catholics being super rebellious with the bishops and having the notion that the church should fold to nationalistic policy. I agree, Santiago. I also, as a world power, you have some moral obligation to help abroad. Again, we're slicing the line real thin between politics and religion here, but according to theological and Catholic, theological Christian understanding and Catholic doctrine, again, not dogma, Catholics are supposed to help the less fortunate. So JD Vance is actually in trouble with the bishops, and I think he actually said something kind of stupid. We might do Michael Lofton at the end of all this. I don't think we're going to, but Michael Lofton actually did a video on this.
So this is a laughably insincere claim that not even the vice president actually believes. And Vance knows this is not true because Vance knows that progressive folks spend an awful lot of time advocating for the interests of the minority.
No, so the actual numbers show, and is it polls? What is it? No, it's not polls. Is it Pew? Christians and Catholics actually do the most donating. So back up. I get it. But progressives are not the leaders in charity. We are.
The marginalized, the oppressed communities here within the United States. And Vance knows this because Vance has to spend an awful lot of his political career advocating directly over and against the interests of minoritized and marginalized and oppressed communities.
Again, that's your political bias talking, not actually JD Vance. JD Vance might be an ass, but your politics are getting in the way of your messaging, which I realize that people who are watching you probably don't care about that, so they're just going to agree with you. But in actuality, there's a technical issue here with what JD Vance is saying, because he's going against the Catholic bishops and he's going against the USCCB.
Communities here within the United States. What Vance is doing here is aping the moral circle heat map meme, which is a right-wing authoritarian misunderstanding and
So I don't agree with where Dan's about to go, because it doesn't have to be this. One, it's giving way too much credit to JD. JD might not even be aware of this reference, for one. Number two, even if he is aware of it, that doesn't mean that he's embracing it. Now, if Dan can show proof that JD not only had access to this information, but actually referenced this information, then I'm completely wrong here. But without that, this is just a false connection, a coincidence.
Misrepresentation of an image that is provided in this research. Ideological differences in the expanse of the moral circle. You've probably seen either one or both.
Like, seriously, I say stuff all the time without checking. Just FYI.
Of these heat map images. On the left, we have the highest value on the heat map scale for conservatives. On the right, we have the highest value on the heat map scale.
Plug it in my phone. Continuing.
Scale for liberals. And what right-wing authoritarians misunderstand this heat map to mean is that liberals prioritize the interests of all humans on Earth as well as inanimate objects and plants and animals throughout the universe over and directly against the interests of their own families and their own communities. And they misunderstand the conservative heat map to indicate that conservatives appropriately prioritize the interests of their own families and those around them over and against inanimate objects elsewhere in the universe. And this misunderstanding is based on a very unclear statement in the discussion of the procedure. You see the top highlighted statement says, we also explained to participants that these categories were non-overlapping, such that giving to one category, e.g. extended family.
Again, you have to show that JD Vance is actually referencing this, and I don't know that he is.
would not include an inclusive category, e.g. immediate family. This makes it sound like whatever you choose to highlight on those concentric circles excludes all the other categories. And that would be correct if this were a description of the procedure that resulted in the heat maps, but it's not. This is an entirely different procedure that is a part of study 3A in this article. This is talking about the allocation of 100 different moral points. This is not the procedure that resulted in the heat maps. You have to go down below. In addition, participants
Dan, I'll be right
also completed a more qualitative measure of the extent of their moral circle by clicking on rungs extending outward and representing the same categories as in the moral allocation task. See supplementary note 4. This measure allowed us to create heat maps to visualize the relative sizes of liberals and conservatives' moral circles. Let's go to supplementary note 4 and look at the highlighted statement. Note that in this scale, the number you select includes
My
the
audience
numbers
is
below
totally
it as
captured by
well.
what you're saying.
So if you select 10,
Wait, 2 people
all
already
mammals,
left.
you are also including numbers 1 through 9, up to all people on all continents in your moral circle. So every number is inclusive of the concentric circles below it. So when
Dan's talking about circles again. Somebody get him his medication.
liberals state that the extent of their moral circle goes out to all people on all continents or inanimate objects everywhere in the universe, it includes everything below it. Now, if you look on the conservative
Alternative take. JD Vance misunderstood a quote or used a quote improperly and didn't think twice about it because he was using it as cover to not sound like a dirtbag. And then the Catholic bishops called him out on it. So then he yelled back at the Catholic bishops. And it's kind of a dead issue because Trump's going to do what Trump's going to do regardless of how much interference JD Vance runs for him.
heat map, the red area extends out to about number 4, which means that the highest extent of the conservative moral circle goes to all of your friends, including distant ones, and then it drops off sharply once we get to all of your acquaintances. In other words, conservatives only care about everybody falling more or less within Dunbar's number. So this is a pretty
I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I think you're wrong.
intuitive, this is a pretty
Also a Catholic, also a Christian.
evolutionarily natural concept of where our moral concern should be located. But again, the moral circle heat map is widely misunderstood and misrepresented by folks who think that it means that liberals don't care about their own families. Nobody who knows progressives thinks that's true. And if you think that's true, you need to grow the hell up. Just like the vice president, who actually told people that liberals have inverted this concern because they're advocating.
Okay. So again, he's not wrong about his observation, even if you don't like it. Liberals, progressives, whatever you want to call them. I wouldn't call them classically liberals because classically liberals are now more on the conservative centrist side of things. Moderate centrist side of things. But JD Vance and President Trump are riding a wave of sentiment where people are tired of the DEI progressive woke bullshit. It doesn't matter how much you support it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I'm in communities that are affected by it. People are sick of it, including people in these affected communities. We're talking about LGBTQ people. We're talking about African Americans or black people, whatever the correct PC term is. In fact, people are sick of PC altogether. We're talking about Hispanics. We're talking about Asian Americans. And I know this because I talk to them. Isn't the constant trope is that progressives have family? Yeah, I mean, that is the trope. And that's what we're saying. We're tired of tone policing. We just are. Like, America is sick of it. That's why America almost unanimously voted out everything that represented what you're representing, what you're presenting here as a good. America is rejecting as an evil. I don't care if Germany gets pissed off about it. I don't care if, I don't know, what's another country? Sweden gets scared about it. The truth is, the majority of the world is rejecting this new ideology that was foisted upon them without their consent. I don't want to be called Latinx. I really don't. And when I went, and this is back when I was working for a corporation, I went and I asked all my Hispanic coworkers because I live in a predominantly Catholic Hispanic community, and all of them said, we hate this. We hate it. We don't want it. We reject it. To a person, man, woman, gay, straight, it didn't matter. All of them hated it. I have friends who are transgender. They don't like the activists that are representing them. They want to protect their rights. That's not what I'm saying to you. They don't like the activists that are currently speaking for them. They don't agree with the activists who have the dominant spot on the stage. CNN has learned this lesson. MSNBC has learned this lesson. You, for some reason, have not. Comic books have learned this lesson. Comic book sales are down in the toilet because of the progressive bullshit. And guess what Disney and Warner Brothers are doing? They're pulling back on all the progressiveness so that way they can sell comics again so they don't go out of business. Regardless of how strong you feel about it, people don't agree with you. That doesn't mean that they're hateful bigots. Because the people themselves, the communities themselves are saying enough. So you're going to have 2 isolated or 3 isolated areas or 4 isolated areas in Austin, Seattle, San Francisco, New York, or parts of New York, and that's it? Like, that's going to be your country? You have the rest of America that's like, nah, screw it. We want to afford groceries. We don't care about initiatives. We want gas to be a certain price. We don't want electric cars. Like, it doesn't matter how strong you feel about it, man. Okay? Like seriously, like, tone it down. You and Randal and a few of the other guys, like, just chill, dude. It ain't affecting you. You're a straight white man. You're fine. It's affecting me. I ain't freaking out. It's affecting my friends. They ain't freaking out. In fact, of our friends, those who were super Democrat who were freaking out, now that like a week has passed, most of them are like calming down and like realizing, okay, this is just a new political wave. The pendulum swung the other way. If we're going to continue to support these causes, we need to be smarter about the way we support them and not be belligerent to the people who disagree with us. Or you're going to keep losing people who would want to support you. Maven says it's really hard to listen to Dan, a radical leftist who is smug and also wrong quite often, likes to cite consensus when in fact it's not consensus. My issue with MAGA is that their solutions are bizarre and misguided. I agree. I agree with both those statements. The problem with MAGA isn't that they want to make America great again. If you think that's the problem, you're not listening. The problem is that their solutions are not based on reality. They're based on fantasy. They're based on perceptions of reality, based on conspiracy theories, based on things that you're saying right now. So the idiots on the conservative side are hearing the smart people on the left side say things that aren't based on lived reality, but on theory, and they're freaking out and they're saying crazy shit because they don't have the facts and the data that you have to reference. So they're making connections differently than you're making because they don't have the information that you have to make those connections, and they don't trust the sources where you're getting that information. So they're never going to look at those sources and they won't believe them. Santiago says, to be honest, are you going to waste government funds just to stop adding X to the word Latin? Most Hispanics don't even use. Yeah, well, no, I mean, that's the problem. Or that's the problem. That's the problem. And that's what Trump is tapping into. He's tapping into the rage that people feel when they see money going to causes that don't matter. Just straight up. Nobody cares about that stuff. People care about eating food, having shelter, having clothes. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you want to call JD Vance evil for himself being self-interested, you're going to have to call Richard Dawkins evil. Because the selfish gene, or whatever you want to call it, isn't just isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a lived reality. People are selfish. There's a whole trend in both conservatism and in liberalism of selfishness, of just, in the liberal side, it's like, oh, my self-worth, my self-esteem. On the conservative side, it's Ayn Randianism. They're both stupid ideas. They both are being selfish and putting themselves first before the other person. Just because both sides have a dumb idea doesn't mean that the people on either side are evil. We're all just Americans. We're all just Americans. None of us are evil. Not the left, not the right, not the conservatives, not the progressives. And labeling the other side as evil and gaslighting the other side into thinking that they're evil because they don't agree with you is what's being rejected.
Advocating for the well-being and the humanity of undocumented immigrants. For Vance, this is a zero-sum game. If you're advocating for one, you're excluding the other. Why? Because that's how right-wing authoritarians advocate and exclude. Their advocacy for one is the exclusion of the other. And to demonstrate that, just look at Vance's argument. He does not care about undocumented immigrants in his own community. He doesn't even care about his own community if they don't agree with him ideologically. He's just trying to structure power and boundaries and values in the interest of his own right-wing authoritarian identity politics, because he's a Christian nationalist, and Christian nationalism.
So I can guarantee you that an actual Christian nationalist like Redeem Zoomer cares a lot about what happens to immigrants and poor people. I get that you don't like JD Vance, but Christian nationalism on its own is not the problem. It's the bad actors in Christian nationalism that is the problem. Now, if the majority of Christian nationalists are bad actors and people like Redeem Zoomer are the exception, well, you have to first convince people like Redeem Zoomer that they're wrong for associating. I remember alt-right. Alt-right was like a big, hot trend at one point, and everybody was jumping on it, until the alt-right people started looking like crazy people. And then people were like, whoa. We're not part of that. It was supposed to be this. But the problem is that people on the left and progressive started labeling the alt-right as all those evil things. And so all the cool people who were going into the alt-right to make the right grow, to have it include people who are from these quote-unquote marginalized communities, suddenly they didn't have a political home. These are the same people who voted for Trump this last time around, and these are the same people who used to be Democrats 20 years ago. So,
is about worshiping power and not a...
Like, for real, this is Santiago. Vance slammed the bishops for not caring for cartel victims, but the policies involve kicking out cartel victims back to the cartels. Yeah, I mean, Santiago's completely correct. Dad, I don't know what Santiago does for a living or what his relationship is to YouTube, but he's been on my channel for a long time. You could learn a lot, Dan, from looking at Santiago, listen to what he's saying as a Hispanic person living in America, dealing with these things, or living in Mexico, dealing with these things, instead of your perspective, which is not a perspective that understands the complexities of this problem. You understand the Bible very well, I'll give you that. But you don't understand what it's like to be a Mexican American. Okay? And you definitely don't know what it's like to be an immigrant or a migrant, which there is a difference, by the way. All right, let's move on to the next video, because I wanted to be on Dan's side on this one, and he shat the bed. Let's go to Randal. Randal Rauser. I know I'm misspelling it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care. I don't care. Here we go. Randal, did you do apologetics again? Randal, clean it up. You know better than to do that. Don't do apologetics in public. Shh, what are you, a barbarian? A savage.
Who lack immigrant status within the country.
Love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far
I know. Dan is. I see. This is. I enjoy listening to Dan more than I enjoy listening to Kip. I like Kip. Like I personally like him, but Kip's right like 80% of the time. Dan is a 50-50 thing. So there's like this edge of the seat. Like, is Dan going to get there? Is Dan going to make it? And then like when he doesn't get there, it's like, oh, and it's cringe. And then when he does get there, it's like celebratory. Like there's like a fun edge to Dan. You know what I mean? Like he just goes full bore, even if he's wrong. With Kip's very careful. Kip double checks his sources, triple checks. So Dan, Kip's very rarely wrong. So you don't have that same level of intensity of like, oh my god, is he gonna land the ship? You know. But with Dan, it's all like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen?
the left has completely inverted that. They
He's turning right, he's turning left, he's going this way.
Seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
So that short clip from JD Vance giving an interview with Fox News went viral this past week. And I think for good reason, because it really encapsulates the way that quote unquote MAGA Christianity corrupts.
MAGA Christianity. What do we got? Why no Bowen? You know, I like Bowen. I like Bowen a lot, but he won't come on my channel. He doesn't watch my show. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm friends with the Gar, okay? Dan, I'm friends with the Gar. And you go on... Dan, not Dan, I'm sorry. Bowen, I'm friends with the Gar. I'm friends with BS. And what do? Do you come on my show? No, you go to Michael's show. You go to Michael Beverly's show. I see how it is. I see how it is. Oh, you prefer the white man to the Mexican man. I get it. I get it. You're a little racist. I get it. It's fine. You know, you're a little ethnocentric. You got your jingoism. You love Canada. You hate America. I get it. I get it, Dr. Joshua Bowen. And if you think anything I'm saying is wrong, you can come on this show and tell me so in person. I think bow ties are the... What am I going to say? I think bow ties are the loser ties of the Thai community. That's right. You heard me right. I said bow ties are the loser ties of the Thai community. It's those thick, long ties that you need. Not the little thin ones. No, don't go with the thin ones. Don't go with the Western ones. No, those big, thick 80s ties. You know what I'm talking about? Like the big one, like the 90s ties. You know, that's a tie. That's a real tie, Dr. Joshua Bowen. Doctor of bow ties.
The overarching framework was given at the bottom of the description from Fox News. That Vance is talking about how you ought to prioritize American citizens over what are described as illegal.
Michael Beverly is the Tecate, is the Dos Equis of Mexican, he's the Michelada of Mexican beers. He's an import from America, from Budweiser, that goes to Mexico. I'm the real deal here. I'm 5x5. Literally, 5x5 beer is made in the same hometown that I live. Dark, rich, creamy, thick, yeasty beer. I just called myself yeasty. I don't care.
Illegals, which is intentionally dehumanizing and objectifying language.
No, what's dehumanizing language is I just called myself beer in yeasty. But thank you for playing, Dr. Rauser.
This is how JD Vance initially responded to criticism. So to all the Christians who pointed out that this was a complete corruption of Christianity, he said, well, just Google Ordo Amoris. So the order of love, which is a doctrine that comes from St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. JD Vance says, you just have to look that up. That will explain everything. Really? The concept of an order of love, an ordo amoris, is this idea that we begin with love of God. Love of God defines us, enables us to have self-love, which then, because it is conditioned rightly, submitted to the love of God, it becomes an ecstatic love going outwards from there. So it goes out to those in our immediate vicinity, to our family, and then to our immediate neighbors. and then on to people in the wider geographic or geopolitical region in which we live, and then on to the rest of the world. It is meant to be an ecstatic love that flows out based upon love rightly sourced in God. That's the concept of an ordo amoris. What JD Vance wants you to think, rather, is that the ordo amoris, or right ordering of love within a Judeo-Christian ethical and theological framework, is that which prioritizes love for people who have landed immigrant status or who are citizens in the geographic region in which you live, versus an
See?
over against
YouTube,
those
this is
who
what happens
lack
when you
legal
don't have ad
status
blocker.
in the region in which you live, which is just an insane definition of the ordo amoris, or any concept of a Judeo-Christian ethic of love. The Trumpian MAGA dehumanization, objectification, villainization of migrants and refugees began when he rode down that golden escalator 10 years ago this June. And he launched his campaign, his first campaign for president, by saying about Mexican people who are coming into the United States, quote, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people.
They're in my monetization. Thank
That
you, Randall.
rhetoric, that language has had an incredible impact, a definitional impact on the very understanding, the concept of what the MAGA movement is. Just think about the implications of this language. To talk about the entire group of migrants from Mexico and to define them as criminals and rapists, and then to add a qualification. So yeah, I've talked about them as criminals and rapists, but some, I assume, are good people. What does some mean? In this context, the adjective appears to mean a certain unspecified number, amount, or degree.
So I disagree
Trump
with
is saying
what Randall's doing here. I think this is a misread of what Trump is saying. Trump doesn't check what he's saying. He's not being strategic. He's just playing to his base. He's throwing out red meat. He's not thinking about what he's saying. He's just says stupid shit. So, and the other thing that should be noted is that I live on the border, and I have friends who have to deal with these issues. This is not anything different than the Hispanics and Mexicans who live on this side, and also who live on the other side and work on this side or go to school on this side, say about the illegal immigrants themselves. We have to deal. The Hispanic community, the Latin American community, has to deal with the crime that happens from these illegal crossings. And it's not just MS-13, it's not just the gangs, it's not just the cartels, it's not just the drugs, it's also the people who are coming across. There's an intermixture of criminality with legitimate refugees, and you don't know who's who or which is which. And it's really hard for them. I know a few years ago I met some people that came across, and their story was horrific. Their story was, they were happy to be here, but man, it was horrific what they had to get through to get here. Like the amount of bad actors and criminals that they had to interact with and the things they had to do to get here was a horrific story. It was not a happy story. So to act as Randall is acting, as if what Trump is saying is so out of pocket that it's not in touch with reality. No, the immigrants themselves are experiencing the harshness of this journey. They themselves are seeing what it's like to have to do this while a criminal element is also part of it. There is legal, not illegal, legal immigration that's happening. There is legal ways for these immigrants to become American citizens. My wife is going through that process right now. I have friends whose wives are going through that process right now. Oh, surprisingly, I don't have any friends whose husbands are going through that process, but I have coworkers who are going through that process to become American citizens through work. So this is not an honest take on what's happening, and not all Hispanic voices have the same opinion. In fact, if you look at like the Mexican president, who's the lady, if you look at Mexican policies, they're stricter on illegal immigration than we are. So
we definitely know that migrants from Mexico and more broadly from Latin America are criminals. We know that they're rapists, but some, an unspecified
that's
number,
completely out of context. It makes him sound so bad. That's not Randall saying that. This is his analysis.
are not actually criminals or rapists. They are good people. You see,
I haven't thought about that Santiago says the big issue is that there's a shortage of judges that allows for the cases to be heard. I haven't thought about that angle, but yeah, for my wife, it's so the paperwork gets assigned to a person, and what the person who gets the paperwork is the one who makes the decision, not necessarily a judge. So even the application process is completely bureaucratic, and there's a ton of red tape. And depending on who it is that's doing the looking, you're going to get a different response. When we started this process, unofficially, the official said, "Look, between your education, between your legality of getting here, you didn't cross in here illegally. You came here legally. Just stay and fight the battle at court. Pay whatever fines you have to pay. We're not going to kick you out. And at the end, you get your citizenship. And if for some reason they require you to go back to your home country or your home state for 3 months or 6 months or 6 weeks, just do it." And what a lot of people do is they go on vacation. So what a lot of my friends who are like, they're legal immigrants, then they marry an illegal, and when the illegal has to go back, they go back with their spouse and they have a vacation and they get to meet their in-laws. Like, it's not like this is not workable. Literally, there are people who live on this side of the border who go over to Mexico to work every day. And there are people on that side of the border who come into America to work every day. There are people in our schools who go to work, come to school every day, who live on that side. They're legal. They're doing this legally. This is legal. And they come here, and then some of them are migrants, and some of the people who live here on this side are migrants. Again, migrants are different than immigrants. And so they go and they do migrant work. And so they're here for half the year, and then half the year they're in another state, picking fruits and vegetables, and then they come back. So I feel like Randal and Dan don't have a strong understanding of the complexities here, mostly because they're looking at it through a kind of white savior complex lens. And when you're actually of the people, it's a bit different. So Santiago says Mexican immigration police is a cartel themselves. They scam and rob migrants all the time, and they let migrants burn inside a camp. Yes, I have dealt with Mexican police before. It is purely a bribe culture, and it is very bad. It's very corrupt. So it's a hard thing to deal with. I remember one time when I was a teenager, they simply asked for my car. They said, "Hey, where's your car? And we'll let you go." And I'm like, because I went to a bar as a teenager, because the drinking age is 15 over there. But if they do a sweep, you get arrested with everybody else. And they're like, "Yeah, we'll let you go. Like, you're not going to get charged with anything, but we want your car." My dad had to give them like $500 or $600. So yeah, I mean, it was yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And if I didn't know the name of the son of the police chief, they probably wouldn't have called my dad to get me and my friend out. So yeah, New Mexico is a very different place. It's not America, and the police system there is not, the justice system there is not fair. There's a lot of thumbs on a lot of different scales. So I was 18 or 19. It did, Santiago says you definitely need a wall, but a major reform of the immigration process is sadly it's either or thing. Yeah, I mean, just having safer paths for people to come through immigration would be a big help. It would be a big help. And when I say paths, I don't mean like just legal paths. I mean like literal roads and paths to keep the legal immigration flowing, and to disincentivize the illegal immigration would be great.
see how this framing is? It's not that a subset may be criminals and rapists, which is, of course, what you're going to find in any sufficiently large demographic sampling of people. Rather, it is, they're generally defined as criminals and rapists, and then a subset, an undefined subset for good people. He flips it on its head. But then he even goes further than that. He says, not that they definitely, a subset are good people, but that he is charitably going to assume that a subset are good people. So, Mexicans, immigrants from Latin America, migrants, refugees coming into the country on the southern border are to be defined as criminals, rapists, and we will charitably assume that some subset of that larger population of criminals and rapists may in fact be good people. That is how he wants to begin to frame 10 years ago the way that people think about refugees, migrants, immigrants coming from the southern border. So, these are the people we're talking about. The people that...
Look at this photo. I don't think Randal or Dan see the racism in the representation that they choose. I don't think they see it. I really don't. I think they're oblivious to it. I don't know the cartel situation. Some friends of mine who were missionaries. They're from Mexico, but they lived on this side. They were missionaries going back to Mexico. This is years ago. They were talking about that they would have to openly bribe the cartels to get through certain streets. That certain streets and certain tolls were just controlled by the cartels and not by the state. Like literally, you see a police patrol, you'd have to bribe them to get through, and then you'd get to the cartel-controlled one, and the cartel sometimes wouldn't ask for a bribe; they were just working as security. So it's a really bizarre situation there.
That you might need every...
And that doesn't make the cartel the good guys, by the way. Not everyone is a farmer. Yeah, I know. Like I literally was saying, like I don't think they can see the. You go to Mexico City, like people are living in luxury. I just got back from China. People are not, they're not living under an oppressed regime. They're just living their lives. They have fancy computers and fancy cars, and they live in, skyscrapers. Like I get it. You have an image of life in these countries from like 30 years ago, and you think that's still the case, but they have laptops and iPhones just like everybody else. I guarantee you, in real life, every single person there has an iPhone, has a computer, has an Xbox or a PlayStation. All of them. They're not. Yeah.
Every day, they are this group right here: criminals, rapists, and potentially some in there may even be good people. If you think that I'm reading too much into what Trump said here, you're not giving him enough.
Santiago says there's like 2 major cartels, but hundreds of gangs and warlords that associate with either cartel. And again, like I said, some police forces are more corrupt than others. Some cartels have more, or I should say some gangs have more altruistic goals than others. So it's hard to overgeneralize. So yeah.
Of credit, and you're not paying attention to the last 10 years.
Give me a second. My dad's moving around. I'm going to go check on him real quick. I'm going to put an intermission. I'll be right back, and I'm going to mute the mic, okay? All right. And we'll do some background music while we wait.
Couldn't stop us like a good drug. Never run. We hook up in my car, driving so far. Play your guitar, you show me your art. Let down our guards, think with our hearts. Stare at the stars, we were never apart. Drinking too young, way too much fun. Out in the sun, open when it's gone. Took you to prom, dance to our song. Dance all night long till the lights come on. I remember everything and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be. And how careless we could be. And how careless we could be. Late nights, long fights, it felt right, we were alive. We would go out, we were so.
This is repeatedly what he has done. So think back, for example, to the debate with Kamala Harris in October of 2024. What happened? What was the most memorable line of that debate?
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people.
You know, Trump's a great liar because his lies are fun. So even when you see through them, you don't care. That's a great talent. That is a great talent.
That live there.
Of course, that went viral. There was a popular song, "They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats," and people were singing that, and it was funny and it was absurd. People are making merchandise and making money off of it. But at the heart of it is a population in an economically challenged part of the country, which was depending on migrant labor that had been brought into the country legally. And these people were being targeted by Trump's campaign with a completely false lie that they were eating animals, pets. And of course, this is part of a long known bit of racist rhetoric. I remember growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, and people would talk about how at Chinese restaurants, they would secretly give you cat and dog meat instead of what you thought was beef or chicken. And this is an old racist and xenophobic trope.
I'm going to be blunt. My wife has denied for years that Chinese people ate certain animals. We went to a mountain called Flower Mountain, and they had those animals strung up and dried out to eat as beef jerky. She was not pleased. She was like, "Oh, I didn't want you to see that." And I was like, "Well," she's like, "I've never seen that before." I'm like, "Well, I've seen it now, so I know it's real." So yeah, no, it's a thing. It's a thing.
By which you target and scapegoat immigrant communities by alleging that they eat verboten, forbidden things. Same thing that Trump and Vance were doing in attacking.
Again, Randal Rauser, in a technical sense, is not wrong. I mean, the pagans did this to the Christians. The Christians, the Jewish people did it to the Christians as well. The Christians then did it to the pagans and the Jews. You know, the Japanese did it to the Chinese. The Chinese did it to the Japanese. But the thing is, in real life, people do eat different foods in different cultures. And ethnic cuisine is a thing. Like I saw bats and dogs that were edible. I saw food. If you go to certain parts of Latin America, they eat guinea pigs. Like it's a thing, man. Like you're just gonna. Like, in Mexican culture, it was really weird for a lot of white people that we eat menudo, which is the guts and intestines, the stuff that because we were workers, we would get the stuff that was rejected by the rich white landowners. So we would eat the leftovers, and we ate that, and that's our food. So when you think of Mexican food, it's actually not Mexican food. It's Tex-Mex food. Real Mexican food doesn't look anything like Tex-Mex food. It's not street tacos, dude. And real Spanish food doesn't look anything like Mexican food. So American Chinese food has nothing to do with actual Chinese food from China. So, like, I mean, yeah, you're right. You're right. Technically, you're right, Randal. But on another level, that doesn't necessitate racism. Sometimes it's just ignorance, and sometimes it's just what you've been exposed to. And if all you've been exposed to is criminality, that's what you're going to think it is, especially if you're completely segregated from the culture that you're interacting with. hence wokeism is a bad idea. You need to have people integrate. You need to have people get to know each other. You need to have people talking to each other.
Dehumanizing the Haitian population of Springfield, Ohio. And the impact can hardly...
It'd be really hard. Pepina is good. So I know that this sounds totally anti-woke and anti-progressive, but the truth is, if you had legitimate assimilation happening where the Haitian immigrants were getting English lessons, where they were being put into the American communities. So they weren't just working hard labor jobs and living in their own segregated communities, but they were actually working office jobs and maybe jobs that they were qualified for based on their qualifications from their home country. So this happens with my wife. My wife has a doctorate degree, but when she tried to work here, everyone wanted her to start off at the bottom. That was humiliating for her. She wasn't willing to do that. You know, you just simply have to let people have the equivalence exams. You know, you have to start doing that. And once you do, there really shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we should, at this point, in this day and age with the internet, we should have a global education credential system where people who are from other countries who immigrate here for desperate reasons can use their legitimate credentials from other countries to get good jobs instead of working shit labor. I'm sorry, that's a real problem. And it's not going to be solved by segregating people and by talking about whiteness and white fragility and white guilt. Nobody gives a shit. People want to work.
To be overstated. There were multiple bomb threats directed at different parts of the city. The city was terrorized. The schools were shut down because of bomb
I think your definition of that word and my definition of the word are probably a little different.
threats. The Haitian population was left in great fear. So just in this most recent article, fear of what is to happen, Haitians in Ohio City brace for Trump's return. Everything he said there was a lie, but it terrorized Haitians. Now, just in the last week, there's been news about how the Trump government had a standoff with the country of Colombia about sending back people who were being deported. I think a lot of people don't understand what actually happened here. So what typically happens is when a government, including the US, when they deport people who lack immigrant status within the country, they charter an airplane, and it would cost about $100,000 to charter an airplane, a commercial aircraft in which people are flown and treated with dignity because they're not criminals. Lacking legal status within the country is not itself a felony crime. But what Trump wanted to do was to use, and he has been using, military aircraft, which instead of costing $100,000 to deport people to use the plane, cost between $250,000 and, depending on the plane used, up to $800,000. So between 2.5 and 8 times the cost. And he puts people into these planes and he shackles them, treats them like they are criminals. And that's what he was doing to Colombia, to dehumanize these people, to terrorize them, and to make a statement to these countries. It was all about humiliation and objectification. And incidentally, The Independent reported 200 deported Colombians included pregnant women and children, but no criminals. So this is part of an ongoing...
Not this time, Thomas, but last time I was in China, I did eat street meat. Mystery meat. I ate some. It was delicious. It was delicious. The neighborhood that I live in is kind of middle upper class in China, so there wasn't as many opportunities to eat street food. But in the place where my wife was at when I went to visit several years ago, that community was lower income and it was a college town, so we had a ton of street food. This community that it was like lower middle class, and it was like a lot of like student housing, that kind of thing. This time around, we're living in a slightly affluent, if not affluent, neighborhood. So yeah, so we were there wasn't as many opportunities for street food.
Pattern of targeting, objectifying, dehumanizing, right back to 2000.
By the way, they have corner stores, but not like gas station corner stores. So like, it's a Circle K or it's a Circle K is really more Japan, but it's It's like 7-Elevens, and there's like a few other stores that they have there. There's a Watson's or whatever, and it's there's no gas though, so it's just the supplies that come from that country. So if you're a Westerner, you have to go to a Watson's or you have to go to a 7-Eleven, because otherwise you're not going to get the supplies you need. Santiago said, yes, I was in a wet market. I went to one of the not one of the biggest markets, but I went to a major market just outside of my neighborhood. We rode bikes to the. By the way, motorcycles are outlawed in the city that I live. That's interesting. But we rode bicycles to the market, and it was interesting, man. Like you saw live animals that they kill. Like when you say you want to eat it, like you say, hey, I want that meat. They kill the animal in front of you and they skin it. What was cruel is they don't always kill the animal before they skin it. They'll start skinning it and they'll slit its throat at the same time. So that was, it's not nice. It's not kind. PETA would not like China. PETA would not like China.
When Trump said of Mexican immigrants coming to the country on the southern border,
and by the way, the area that I live in, I told my wife this. We used to have markets like that before HEB and other big supermarkets came in. Really, it's just HEB down here. But before HEB moved in, we had local markets. Like we had places we could go and get live animals and live food. Although they killed it beforehand, so you didn't actually have to see that. But they'd kill their supply before the day started. This is back when I was like 3 to 6, maybe 8 years old at max. By the time that I became a teenager, all those places were gone. They'd all gone out of business.
They are criminals and rapists, and some we will charitably assume may be good people. This comes back to a question: who is my neighbor? This famous question that was posed to Jesus. If you listen to people like JD Vance and the way he wants you to think about the
I'm probably going to watch Dan McCullen's Who is My Neighbor video, but not right now. Maybe next week, if I remember. Oh, there was a bunch of weird sea animals that they had there. Sea urchins, stuff like that. What upset me the most, like I told my wife, like it legitimately upset me. Like I wasn't prepared for what I saw, was the turtles. They had a bunch of turtles and a bunch of turtles. They even had one that was swimming around with its head cut off, and I was just like, I can't. I told my honey, I told my wife, I was like, this is too much. I can't. I legitimately feel bad, and I legitimately want to buy every turtle to save it. Like I was just like, we got to go. I can't tolerate this anymore. Like the sharks and all that stuff, that didn't bother me at all. The eels, the chickens, the ducks, none of that messed me up. But it was seeing the turtles that messed me up bad. Like I was like, honey, I can't. We got to go. And she kind of laughed and she said, okay. And then we walked away, which made me, she does not understand pets at all. And I was like, okay, this is why she doesn't understand pets. What's funny, in the affluent neighborhood that I live in, and I'm stressing the word affluent here, there are lots of people with cats and dogs. When I was there a few years ago, before these neighborhoods were built, that was not the case. There were no pets. Like there were 0 pets. Now there are pets. And so it's interesting how, as the income comes up and you're not struggling for food, animals can be seen as family members and not like a source of protein. So it's very good. The level of development in China is amazing. And if you don't understand that and you think it's the China from the 1980s or from the Joy Luck Club, you're just wrong.
Ordo Amoris, the order of love. He wants you to think this is something that starts off with God and yourself and your family, and then passes over the neighbors living in Springfield, Ohio, or the neighbors picking fruit next to you in the valley in Central California because they lack a permanent residence card or a passport. Even though they are geographic neighbors to you, no, your love shouldn't
the bishops really attacked JD Vance for the stupidity of his statement. So, yeah.
Extend to them. It should only extend to people who are in the country legally.
I want to do Michael Lofton, but I don't think we're going to have time. I don't want to go beyond 2 hours tonight. I still got to feed the cats. I still got to exercise. Although I skateboarded today, which felt great. I'll show you the skateboard before we move on, because I got some stickers from China. I went to this place called The Hills. There's this cool kid there, and my wife is like really stressing the Chinese. And then I just told the kid, I said, "Hey, do you happen to have any bushings?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, of course I do." And he spoke great English, with a very heavy Chinese accent, but great English. And me and him were just having a conversation. My wife was a little embarrassed because she was like stressing the Chinese, and she's like, "This is so Chinese. Like we're in such an area." And blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Honey, there's writing in English throughout this entire area. Like all the mall that we were in, the specific strip mall, and like advanced mall, like it was like there was English everywhere." I'm like, "Honey, they speak English in this section. We're fine."
It doesn't extend to these people if they lack legal status to be in the country. This has absolutely nothing to do with St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, the Ordo Amoris, or anything Jesus taught. When Jesus taught, "Who is my neighbor?" he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, who the very person you thought would be the least likely, because they were despised by Jews, the Samaritans. They were the people that showed the love of a neighbor. Jesus likewise calls us to show love. He never predicates the love that you show for another person on whether they have a passport or a permanent residence card. Love is the people who are vulnerable, who are in need, and who you come into contact with. That is the neighbor in your life. It is the Haitian immigrant living in Springfield, Ohio. It is the Mexican immigrant in California. It is anybody you are going to meet who is vulnerable. What JD Vance is doing is corrupt.
By the way, one of the worst things about the white savior complex when it comes to Mexicanos is the way that they talk down to Mexicans. Like, I always get the compliment, "Oh, you speak really good English for Mexican." That one annoys me. But the more interesting is they act as if Mexican, as if Spanish. I was gonna call it Mexican. Like we call it, in English, we call English American here in America. We're like, "Hey, speak American, speak Mexican." The Spanish in Mexico is beautiful and rich. And I get it. Like when you're talking to Tex-Mex, you're talking to whatever, border town, immigrant Spanish, lower educated Spanish, you might think, "Oh, well, it's not as advanced as English." No, Spanish is a beautiful language. It's totally complicated, really hard to read. If you're treating it like a language, like not like some kind of subservient language. So you're actually diving into Spanish. Try to read some of the Spanish poetry. Try to read some of the Spanish books, not the ones who are translated from English into Spanish. That exists way too much, and I wish they'd stop. Like, just slow down and let more of the stories from Mexico and let more of the stories from Spain come to America without doing that reverse translation thing. Like, no. Just look at the beauty of Spanish when you let people actually who are educated in the language speak it. Oh, it's beyond beautiful. I can't speak it. Like I suck at Spanish, but when you hear someone who's highly educated in Spanish speak, so low level Spanish, I can do all day and night. Like someone can come to me and like talk to me about something, and I got it. If they're even college educated in Mexico, like they don't have to have an advanced degree, like just a bachelor's level style degree. I'm lost. Like as soon as they start talking, they start using the big words, the big Spanish words. I got nothing. So yeah, don't let the Randal Rousers and Dans of the world confuse you. Spanish people, Hispanic people, Latin people, we're not helpless. We're not helpless. We're not dumb. We're not uneducated. We're people with variety of social strata, and some of us are very successful, and some of us are failures in life, and it has nothing to do with our ethnicity or our race.
Distorting, bastardizing the Christian gospel in service of MAGA.
Also, most of us are Catholic, and the rest of us are Christian, and some of them are like, goth. Like there's a huge goth scene in Mexico. I don't know why.
So I'm glad that awful clip where JD Vance talks about his corrupt understanding of the Ordo Morris went viral this week, because it really demonstrates this theme that has extended for 10 years, has defined this is DNA for the MAGA movement for the last 10 years, to attack migrants, I mean, what is the most memorable image of the entire MAGA movement? It's 3 words: build the wall. That is both a physical barrier on the southern border, but that is also a metaphor. It is a metaphor for building walls against other people, including many of the most vulnerable people within your communities. These are the very people that Jesus called.
I know a lot of Catholics don't like Michael Lofton, but a lot of Catholics don't like me. So who gives a crap? Let's do it. Is it under video or is it under live? Let's see. I think it's a live thing. No, here it is. Let's see. Let me see. Let's see. I thought I saw Trent in one of these photos. Oh, I'm right now reading Trent's Why We're Catholic to kind of counterbalance my video I'm going to do on Gavin Ortland's is it Why We're Protestant? I keep on calling it Why We're Protestant. It's not even the name of the book. Whatever. I'm gonna on his Protestant book. It is just a book of fallacies, man. By the way, I'm halfway through Trent's book. There are fallacies in there, obviously, but they're not as many, and they're within context. There's like 3 or 4 big fallacies that, and 4 might be an exaggeration, but there's like 3 or 4 big fallacies that Trent has said so far. I'm on like chapter 16 or 17. Like I'm toward the end of his book, and he's only had like 3 or 4 bad fallacies. Gavin Ortland's book was fallacy after fallacy after fallacy. Like it was just fallacy. The book, man.
Where he makes some pretty explosive comments in relation to the USCCB.
I'm gonna
Catholic bishops here of
I'm gonna
the
go feed my
United
cat for
States.
1 second. I'm gonna put it on intermission and put some music on.
Yeah, it's our time to shine. Yo, that's the kind of state of mind you gotta combine with hard work and time. You gotta climb to the top. Don't let yourself drop till your heart stops. Let this beat rock. Got a new clock and a new stock for this new rock. Just let your mind loose from the new stock. Drunk off the goose, thinking that I'm too pop. Getting caught with a few thoughts cause I'm too lost. Off, the speakers can't even handle me. Giving what I got, nobody's gonna drain my energy. And I will never stop, I'm motivated by enemies. Setting up shop so everybody remember me. And though I am not going through life regretfully, I'd rather work non-stop, what they call incessantly, than work some odd job just to live life pleasantly. Already got lost in my mind, not a fantasy, I'm getting there. Forgotten soul, so stop, drop, and roll. You lost all control and pop off your ball. I got squat, I fold, I'm not bought, I'm sold. My stock rocks, it's gold. Hey, knock, knock, she holding shit, talk to close. I ain't stopping though, it's hip-hop, you know. Or is it rock and roll? I'm not dropping down, no, my pocket's grown. You can't stop the show, so get rockin' on. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't here to make friends. Yeah. I ain't never slowing down, keep on going till I'm down. No, I'm never slowing down, cause we're blowing up now. I ain't never slowing down, keep on going till I'm down. No, I'm never slowing down, cause we're blowing up. Hard words like a weapon, attack with no questions. In my own section, and they still disconnected, cause their mind's been infected, and they're filled with objection. Too filled for recollection, so we're losing all attention. They don't know I'm in contention, cause I'm gaining their attention, cause I'm making a connection. Lyricism and aggression got me feeling my ascension. In my passion, my profession, I'm attacking my obsession, taking action and progressing. I go off on the enemy, that's what makes them scared of me. Make my plans carefully, then execute them daringly. They say I act recklessly, but that's why I'm effective. See, you can't predict my tendencies, I offer no transparency. Some people think I'm lost, others think I'll be a legend. I'm never gonna stop till I'm one above second. And my thoughts at the top, but my mind stay present. Don't let your dreams stop, cause dreaming is a blessing.
They tell me all the same, told me I won't make a name. But it's not about the fame, it's about keeping me sane. So I stay within my lane, feel my blood pump through my veins, feel a
very, very serious insinuations about the Catholic bishops, very critical of them. And so we're going to take a look at that. Then we're going to see what the USCCB, the Catholic bishops, have said in response to Vance's interview, as well as what Pope Francis has said, specifically about Trump and his immigration policy, which is really what Vance was commenting on. And so we're going to examine all of that in addition to a few magisterial documents on the question. Okay, so before I show you the clips, however, from Face the Nation, where JD makes some very interesting comments, let me show you a survey just that I put out maybe about an hour ago or so. About 204 have voted. And the survey is, do you agree with JD Vance's comments on Face the Nation, blasting the U.S. bishops about their immigration policy? 73% says yes, he was spot on, and 27% say no, he was wrong. It's a little bit more even on the Twitter one that I did, but the Twitter one got less of a response, so take that with a grain of salt. I suppose in a day or so, we'll get about 1,500 votes on here, and we'll get something maybe a little bit more accurate, at least for the audience here. Okay, so what are these controversial comments that Vance has made on Face the Nation? Well, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take a look at them together.
I had it muted, and I was yelling at you guys. I'm right here. You can hear me.
1.25 speed, so it's a little bit fast.
Who knows how much of that I missed?
I'm doing that. Hopefully, I won't get a copyright strike like I did last time that I reviewed Mel Gibson on Joe Rogan. Okay. Here we go. Let's go ahead and dive in around the 9-minute 45-second mark. Let's see what he has to say.
Has to do with immigration.
Sure.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter
And I'm happy about that.
churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid?
Don't misunderstand. Just because I think Dan is wrong in his interpretation doesn't mean that I agree with JD Vance. Again, the lack of nuance and the lack of subtlety for the last, I'm going to say 6 years has been crap. You have to start listening to the other side and hear what they're actually saying.
Or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I'm actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We're going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
That's simony, by the way. You can't buy your way into heaven. Don't be trying to blackmail the church, buddy. You're a Catholic.
Promise to do that, and I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the White War of Joe Biden. Let them talk about people like Lady Ryan who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal.
Somebody said there's an echo. Thank you for letting me know. Let's go through that one more time. But I turned the volume down on my end a little bit, which has probably caused
Some of churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that, and I believe the U.S. Conference Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been
Santiago, you're completely correct.
Wide open border of Joe
So
Biden.
you
Let
personally
them talk
support them
about
going into
people like
schools?
Laken Riley who were brutally
Completely
murdered.
correct.
I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe. Let me ask this question,
But
Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murder in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of
So what's
course.
the point of the question?
You changed the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Giving
So-
the authority
yes,
to go into churches, to go
exactly.
into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce
But
the
that
law
also
everywhere
has
to
a
protect
knock-on
Americans.
effect.
Churches have always enjoyed a privilege of being able to be sanctuaries for people. Violating that is evil, especially from a Catholic.
A chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their
I,
kids to school.
I desperately hope it has a chilling
In the
effect on
churches,
illegal
do you think
immigrants
the
coming
U.S.
into our
Conference
country.
of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals? From
I think the U.S.
law
Conference
enforcement?
of Catholic Bishops has frankly
He doesn't seem to understand the history of Catholics being murdered for speaking out against abuses. I know in America because of the scandal, but in the rest of the world, Catholic churches have been sometimes the only sanctuary for people, including Jewish people during, I forget what it's called, but the persecutions leading, the pogroms, there we go. So, Catholic priests individually and Catholic parishes individually have always been sanctuaries. You saw this in the war between Hamas and Israel. And Israel decided to bomb churches to get to the Hamas people who were looking for sanctuary in Catholic churches and Catholic hospitals. I think that's evil. I like Israel, but I think that's evil. I think that when Netanyahu goes up for war crimes, I think he's going to be found guilty. I think he's already been found guilty already. So yeah, so just because I like Israel, just because I want Israel to win, doesn't mean that I support all the moves that they make. They've done horrible, evil things in the name of this current war. So, you know, just because I support immigration laws and support controls doesn't mean that I support every single idea that Vance and Trump have. Just like I didn't support every idea that Biden had or that Obama had. Obama did some seriously evil shit when it comes to immigration. He had kids in cages legitimately. Like, I don't give a shit what you're saying about Trump. You could go to the border and you could see what was happening. Under Trump, you have Mexican Americans, Hispanics, Latins at the border with Border Patrol and with the National Guard protecting not only I'll say the natives, not only American interests, but protecting the immigrants because they speak the same language. We have the same complexion. We're Hispanic, just like them. Okay? So under Trump, things have been much better when it comes to some of that stuff. Now, mind you, Obama did some truly heinous things as deporter-in-chief. But again, I agree with immigration. I believe countries should have walls, should have borders. So don't misunderstand me. I am a Republican. I am a conservative. But that doesn't mean that I don't think what was being done to the kids when they were being separated from their families wasn't heinous. It was heinous when Obama did it. It was heinous when Biden did it. And it's heinous when Trump does it.
not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
There are 5 legal challenges already to one of the other immigration.
Oh, we're going to have to watch that in a moment here. Again, a lot going on with that. Wow. Gosh, hopefully the audio was a little bit better this time. I apologize for that.
I hope you guys heard what I said.
Wow. Where do we begin with this? So, you know, what's interesting to me is the Catholic bishops responded immediately. I mean, there's already a response on the US CCB website the day that the interview came out, which tells me that the Catholic bishops in the United States are able to respond to things going on and controversies going on when it comes to some things. When it comes to other things, complete silence. For example, whenever Bishop Strickland was right outside of the USCCB, outside of their gathering, called them out, called them all cowards, basically said that they're abandoning the faith and that Pope Francis is a heretic, and they did nothing about that and have been completely silent. So it's interesting that they're pretty selective. I also didn't see this kind of immediate response when it comes to controversies with President Biden. I just have to point that out. There was a whole lot
Agreed.
of silence on part of the Catholic bishops, but it seems that they can
That
respond
bothered
the
me a
very
lot.
same day when it comes to controversies with this administration.
They
Make of
should
that
have.
whatever you will. Let's
They
actually
should
take a
have
look at one
excommunicated
of the
Biden,
responses that has.
and now Biden has excommunicated himself by becoming a Freemason. So I'm a Catholic, so I shouldn't say what I want to say, but yeah, let's just say I'm not a fan of Biden. I'm glad he's out of office.
Has been given, if it's really can even be considered a response. This is what they posted. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops issued the following statement on its long-time partnership with the federal government to serve refugees. And this is because Vance made it, he was implying that the bishops are really more concerned about money that they're receiving from the government than the care of souls and people's lives when it comes to the immigration issue. And that's why I say in the title, he blasts them. It's very clear he's implying that they're not really concerned about people. And he says if they were, they would be concerned about sex trafficking and blah, blah, blah. He's wanting to say they're actually more concerned about the money they're receiving from the government because of this immigration issue. And so they try to respond to that by saying, faithful to the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Catholic Church has a long history of serving refugees. In 1980, the bishops of the United States began partnering with the federal government to carry out this service when Congress created the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. Every person resettled through USRAP is vetted and approved for the program by the federal government while outside the United States. In our agreements with the government, the USCCB receives funds to do this work. However, these funds are not sufficient to cover the entire cost of the program. Nonetheless, this remains a work of mercy and ministry of the church. And so they don't mention him by name, but obviously this is what they're responding to. Question might be, okay, well, how much money are they getting? Well, so there is this. During the Biden administration, the conference's federal revenue for refugee assistance increased eightfold to about 123 million in 2022 from 15 million in 2019, accumulating over 450 million in grants since 2021. Now, the USCCB is saying, well, this isn't enough to cover the programs. I don't know how 123 million and 450 million in grants since 2021 is not enough. Evidently, these are very expensive programs. Be that as it may, they are saying, yeah, it's just not enough to cover it. And that's effectively their response to Vance. So Vance wants to say, yeah, you know what? Not buying it. Basically, they're not interested when it comes to humans and humanity issues, humanitarian concerns. They're more concerned about their money and the bottom line. And so obviously they're denying that, but he is the one who put that out there. Certainly implied it. Now, I also thought it was interesting that he pointed out they should be more concerned about the sex trafficking and stuff like that that's going on. I thought that was interesting in light of course, all of the controversies with, a lot of U.S. priests when it comes to issues of this nature, of this category. I saw billions and billions and billions of dollars by the United States dioceses throughout the entire country have been spent to settle cases of abuse. It's really, really sad stuff. I wonder if he was trying to also imply and kind of take a jab there. They should be more concerned about sex issues and abuse when it comes to sexual abuse than they should be this issue. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't trying to insinuate that. Well, let me also read this to you before we take a look at what Pope Francis has to say. So, U.S. bishops say the refugee program is a work of mercy after criticism from the vice president in his first public interview. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops on Sunday argued that its longstanding refugee program is a work of mercy after JD Vance criticized the bishops' positions on immigration issues. Vance has made the remarks during an interview on Sunday with Face the Nation. Brennan, who was interviewing him, had asked Vance, who is Catholic, and has been, I want to say maybe 2018, somewhere around there, about the USCCB's criticism last week of the Trump administration's various directives on immigration, specifically the government's rescinding of the policy that restricted immigration arrests at sensitive locations such as churches. Vance responded that as a practicing Catholic, he was heartbroken by the bishop's criticisms. So then they just quote him with what we just saw. Asked if he believed the U.S. bishops are actively hiding criminals, Vance argued that the USCCB has not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. That seems to imply that he's answering in an affirmative, right? I mean, he doesn't come out and directly say that they're hiding criminals, but he's implying it with that kind of a response. Brennan also asked Vance about the Trump administration's rollback of U.S. refugees admissions. Vance told Brennan that not all the refugees have been properly vetted. He says, in fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks in our country. So clearly, he says, not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted. So the USCCB on Sunday argued that its own work with refugees is part of a long history of Catholic advocacy for vulnerable migrants. In 1980, the bishops of the United States began partnering with the government. Every person resettled through the program that the church has with the government is vetted and approved for the program by the government while outside the United States. In our agreements with the government, the USCCB receives funds to do this work. However, these funds are not sufficient to cover the entire cost of the program. That's what the statement that we saw from the USCCB. It's interesting they did not disclose how much they were receiving. We had to go to another source to find out how much that was. Nonetheless, this remains a work of mercy and ministry of the church, they argue. Though the U.S. bishops last week praised some of Trump's directives, such as his order asserting the biological reality of sex, USCCB President Archbishop Timothy Broglio said in a statement last week that he took issue with other orders from the White House, such as the immigration directives and the White House's withdrawing from the Paris Agreement Climate Accord. I saw that, and I thought it was interesting that he's able to comment on that but not other issues. Those orders are deeply troubling, he says, and will have negative consequences, many of which will harm the most vulnerable among us. Well, you know what else will also harm the most vulnerable among us? Heresy. Right? False teaching. And I'll note, and I have noted, they've been very, very silent in putting to rest, in addressing a lot of heresy, a lot of schism. Talk. A lot of comments that lead to the spiritual ruin of numerous souls. And also a lot of liberalism from the pulpit. It's interesting we don't get comments on that. I just have to point that out. But I want to take a look at also what Pope Francis has to say. This came out about 7 days ago from The Guardian. I'm going to try to play it. I'm going to mute my mic so we don't get a feedback. And it's, I suppose, in Italian, but they do have caption in English here. So what I'll do is I'll just play through the whole thing and hope that y'all are visually watching to read the English captions. But at the very end, I'll also summarize it for those who are listening in audio only. But I do encourage you to read the captions right now if you are able to. All right, so let's go ahead and begin here.
Domani ci sarà l'insediamento del presidente Trump, il quale ha già fatto sapere che fra 2 giorni vuole cominciare il suo programma di espulsione degli immigrati irregolari dagli Stati Uniti. Ecco, volevo chiedere se vi siete già sentiti, se ne avete parlato.
No, non ci avevamo sentito. Lui è venuto una volta qui. Quando era presidente l'altra volta, ma non ci siamo sentiti. Ma questo, se è vero, sarà una disgrazia.
You guys are watching. You guys couldn't tell me I was muted. How long have I been muted? How long have I been muted, guys? All right, we're going to go back. We're going to go back. We're going to go back.
I'm going to mute my mic so we don't get a feedback. And it's, I suppose, in Italian, but they do have caption in English here. So what I'll do is I'll just play through the whole thing.
Guys, you could have told me. How much time did I waste just...
and hope that y'all are visually watching to read the English captions. But at the very end, I'll also summarize it for those.
Has it been 12 minutes? Have I been muted for 12 minutes?
Those who are listening in audio only, but I do encourage you to read the captions right now if you are able to. All right, so let's go ahead and begin here.
Domani ci sarà.
Tomorrow, there will be the inauguration of President Trump,
L'insediamento del presidente Trump, il quale ha già
who has already made it known that in 2
fatto
days
sapere che fra 2 giorni vuole cominciare
he wants to start his program of expelling illegal immigrants from the United States.
il suo programma di espulsione degli immigrati irregolari dagli Stati Uniti. Ecco, volevo chiedere
So I wanted to ask you if you'd already been in contact and if you have talked about it.
se vi siete già sentiti, se ne avete parlato.
No, non ci avevamo sentito.
No, we have not been in contact.
Lui è venuto una volta
He came here once when he was president last time, but we didn't speak.
qui, quando era presidente l'altra volta, ma non ci siamo sentiti. Ma questo,
But if this is true,
se è vero, sarà una disgrazia.
it will be a disgrace because it would make the poor, unfortunate people
Perché fa pagare ai poveri disgraziati che non hanno nulla
who have nothing to pay the unpaid bill.
il conto dello squilibrio. Non va.
It doesn't work.
Così non si risolvono le
You don't resolve problems this way.
cose. Così non si risolvono.
You don't resolve problems this way.
Okay, so effectively, you know, for those who are unable to read the closed caption, you know, Pope Francis was just asked.
How long was I muted, my audience? Not one text, not one warning that I was muted?
Hey, Trump is about to be inaugurated tomorrow, and, you know, what do you think about his immigration policies? And he's like, well, you know, if what I'm hearing about his policies are true, this is a disgrace, and this is not how you handle this situation. What about people who can't afford to pay their bills, and so on and so forth? You know, that's Pope Francis's perspective. I have heard him in other comments every now and then. The bulk of his comments tend to be very much in favor of immigration, and it's usually not. He doesn't tend to address the context of whether or not these are people who have migrated illegally which I think is the big concern for a lot of people in this discussion in the United States. But he's obviously very, very much in favor of immigration, and he will often appeal to his own family's history as immigrants. And he says that, we shouldn't build borders and walls. We should just receive people. And he has made some comments every now and then, just kind of mentioning it in passing. Okay, fine.
All right, we're going to go 2 more videos and then we're going to
JD
be
Vance
done.
just said something on X that has ignited what can only be described as a firestorm. Like, it is
Let me know if you can hear me.
ridiculous. How many people have been talking about this? And actually, that's what you're kind of watching right here is more talking about this. But basically, his comments, he was talking about ordered love and how we owe specific responsibilities to those closest to us. But this, as I say, it's ignited a...
Cameron, are you a grifter or are you going to be honest? Are you going to be intellectually honest here? Or are you a man of bad faith? Who are you? Does your soul care about the people? Or are you simply trying to throw red meat to an audience that will embrace you? Will you take a stand? Are you willing to sacrifice 68,000 views for the truth to become a channel that gets only 3 to 25 views per video? Are you willing to be a martyr for your faith? Even in a small sense of a martyr, not a real martyr, but Are you willing to make sacrifices for your faith? That means financial sacrifices.
A firestorm of comments. A lot of Christians are fighting back on this, saying that this doesn't actually represent Christian values, which is something that he claims in this video. You know what? Let's just go ahead and get to the video now. Let's watch what he has to say. Then we'll start to break this down. And I think by the end of this video, you're going to see why his comments not only make sense, but are also biblical. But you got to stick around.
Santiago, I trusted you. Thomas, I trusted you. And neither of you told me I was muted.
See why that's the case. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
But there's this old school, and
Don't pretend you're taking a nap, guys. I know you're awake. I can see you. I can see you.
I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership, and President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
And actually, as I say, this triggered an absolute firestorm. Like, X is just ablaze with comments, people on both sides of this. Some have been praising JD Vance for saying what should be obvious, what's also they think in their minds very biblical. And then others like Father James Martin and Dr. Laura Robinson and a lot of others have been claiming that he's pushing a false version of Christianity. So how do we know who's actually right about this? Let's first look at some of the critics. Let's look at Father James Martin, see what he has to say about this. He says, actually, no, this misses the point of Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. After Jesus tells a lawyer that you should love your neighbor as yourself, the lawyer asks him, and who is my neighbor? In response, Jesus tells the story of a Jewish man who's been beaten by robbers and is lying by the side of the road. The man is helped not by those closest to him, a priest and a Levite, but rather by a Samaritan. At the time, Jews and Samaritans would have considered one another enemies. Okay, so he's helping someone who is an enemy of this person is actually the one helping them. So Jesus' fundamental message is that everyone is your neighbor and that it is not about helping just your family or those closest to you. Okay, so this is his critique here, is that actually everyone is your neighbor and there is no hierarchy. There is no hierarchy? There it is. There is no hierarchy of our duties toward other. We should love everyone the same. Let's now look at what Dr. Laura Robinson said. She says, this is not a Christian concept. Vance is just making stuff up, and he knows his audience is so ignorant about Christianity that they'll believe him. You are among that number. She's talking about the person, Jack Poso, who originally posted this clip. Yeah, so that's what his critics are saying. So after the backlash, this is where things start to get a little bit spicy. So JD Vance says, just Google Ordo Amoris, which is a Latin phrase. Aside from that, the idea that there isn't a hierarchy of obligations violates basic common sense. Does Rory, one of his detractors, we haven't talked about him yet, really think his moral duties to his own children are the same as his duties to a stranger who lives thousands of miles away? Does anyone? So he's talking about this is a very commonsensical moral principle, but he also we're gonna talk about the Christian side of things from the Bible and also from church history. But JD Vance, part of his spicy response here says, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The problem with Rory and people like him is that he has an IQ of 110 and thinks he has an IQ of 130. This false arrogance drives so much elite failure over the last 40 years. That's a really spicy take. I can't necessarily say that I disagree with it, though. I think there's a lot of people who think that they're smarter than they actually are. And so they'll go.
Cameron, if you think money and audience is what being a Catholic is about, you're more wrong in your faith than you know.
Go out and they'll think that they can critique someone without really knowing all the facts. But so I did actually Google. That's what he says. He says, just Google Ordo Amoris, right? So what does this phrase actually mean? It means order of love. It comes from St. Augustine's De Civitatis Dei. And I'm absolutely sure that I'm mispronouncing that. It's translated the city of God. All right. And there he argues that love must be rightly ordered to achieve justice and virtue. Augustine basically warns that
I haven't read City of God because it's really long. I'm going to do it as an audiobook, but I might never get to it.
Ordered love, placing lesser loves above the greater ones, leads to moral collapse. Okay, this is what he argues. All right, I just looked it up. It's pronounced De Civitate. That's probably still wrong. De Civitate Dei. Again, the city of God is how you translate that. But this idea has basically shaped Christian moral thought for over a millennium. So JD Vance is not just, he's not making this up. I think that's at least what this shows. So he didn't just come up with this idea out of nowhere. He's echoing one of the most fundamental Christian teachings, at least from church history. Now, let's turn back to the Bible, right? Let's talk about the Good Samaritan story, because the claim from Father...
You're no Michael Lofton, you grifter piece of shit.
James Martin and others, a lot of people are pointing to this parable as like conflicting with JD Vance's point here. So let's actually just read it. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you..."
Submit to your bishop, Cameron.
Read it. And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your..."
Go to confession and confess your sin.
"Neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." Okay, I want you to notice there is a little bit of hierarchy in that one. We're going to take a closer look at that in just a second. Let's continue. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" That's what this whole conversation is about. Who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, "A man was going," and this is where the parable comes in. "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by."
You know, with Dan saying what Dan's saying, why did I not get upset? Why did I make it a joke and laugh about it? Because Dan's not a Catholic. Dan's a Mormon, and he's both a secular scholar and a Mormon believer at the exact same time. It's a very complicated place to be mentally, but he does it. None of that has to do with Catholicism. Cameron's a fellow Catholic, so him saying this is deeply offensive and deeply wrong. Let's see if he comes around for the end of the video, or if he's truly a heretic and a grifter.
By on the other side, but a Samaritan, an enemy, as he journeyed, that's actually not in there, I just added that, but a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave him to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a...
Your bishop has spoken. The bishops of the Catholic Church, who control the See of the United States, the Catholic Conference of Bishops, who control our See, who control our conference, have spoken. The Vatican has spoken. Your Pope has spoken. Submit your will.
A neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers. He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do..."
Your pseudo-intellectualism leads you to arrogance and pride, and your greed and need for money and acclamation leads you to sin, a mortal sin, a grave sin. Save your soul, Cameron. Renounce the income. Donate it all to charity. Donate every penny to charity. Give up your wealth. Even if you have to give up your marriage, do so.
likewise. Our question is, does this parable contradict a hierarchy of love? The short answer is no. The Samaritan did not abandon his family or
love God above all. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. For I did not come to bring peace, but the sword, to divide father from mother, brother from sister, mother from sister, mother from daughter, father from son, husband from wife.
neglect any of his obligations.
Love me more than these.
He simply responded to an immediate moral need. Right? This was immediate. This was right in front of him. This was someone, you might say, a neighbor that was right in front of him. That's what he responded to. And so Jesus was not rejecting ordered love. He was actually condemning hypocrisy. Those who claim to be righteous but ignore acts of mercy that are right, literally right.
So the problem with JD Vance's ordered love is that he gets the order wrong and he misunderstands the passage.
Right in front of them. In fact, in my view, the very structure of this passage reinforces ordered love. Before telling the parable, Jesus states that the two greatest commandments, we talked about this a little bit, love God first, then love your neighbor. The hierarchy already is in place right here in this very passage that people are pointing to. This passage, this parable, also highlights that proximity plays a really important role in moral obligation. The priest and the Levite were the ones physically closest to the injured man, yet they failed to act. But the Samaritan encountered the man on his path and fulfilled his immediate moral duty. But it gets way more interesting than that. Let's go ahead and turn now to the Blue Letter Bible. The Blue Letter Bible. And this is what we're going to be focusing on is in Luke 10:29, the lawyer asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? All right, we're going to focus on what is that word? Who is my...
All right, so we're going to do something I don't normally do on here anymore. I used to do it all the time, but since no one told me I was muted, you're going to suffer through this. I'm going to go get my copy of The City of God, and we're going to read. Great. Now that's on audio. Okay. X23.
Is my neighbor, because a lot of people are saying that everyone, this passage shows that everyone is my neighbor. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Greek. The way that you pronounce this Greek word that is translated neighbor is pleision. Pleision. All right? Placion. All right, so this I think is actually very key to understanding like what this passage is actually about. So according to blueletterbible.org, there's a couple different usages for this term. So any neighbor could be one, a friend. Number two, any other person. And where two are concerned, the other, according to the Jews, is any member of the Hebrew nation and commonwealth. Okay, so it's not just anyone. A neighbor is someone who is part of the Jews, part of the Hebrew nation, part of the commonwealth. All right, and then third, according to Christ, any other man, irrespective of nation or religion, but here's the important part, with whom we live or whom we chance to meet. It's not just anybody. That's not what a neighbor is. A neighbor is not literally everyone. A neighbor is someone irrespective of nation or religion with whom we live or whom we chance to meet. So in this passage, in this parable, Placion does not refer to obligations toward distant people we've never met, but actually to those that we encounter in our daily lives. And that's the point of the whole parable, right? He comes across this person and they don't help him. They don't extend mercy to this person that's right in front of them. You have to be a moral monster in order to do that. And that's what Jesus is pointing out. Like, you claim to be a religious person, yet there's someone in your immediate vicinity and you do nothing. Moreover, the Good Samaritan story is completely unrelated to discussions over mass immigration.
All right, here we go. The fall of the sons of God and the consequent destruction by the flood. It was this free choice of the human, free choice of the will that produced the mingling of the two cities. As the human race progressed and increased, these cities became associated with wickedness. And the result was a kind of amalgam of the two communities. This evil owed its origin, once again, to the female sex, but not in the same way as the evil at the beginning of the world. For these women were not seduced by cunning so as to persuade their husbands to sin. What happened was that the woman, who had been depraved in morals in the earthly city, that is, in the community of the earthborn, were loved for their physical beauty by the sons of God, that is, the citizens of the other city, on pilgrimage in this world. Such beauty is certainly a good, a gift of God, but he bestows it on the evil as well as on the good for this reason, for fear that the good may consider it an important good. Hence the abandonment of the greater good, one that is confined to good people, led to a fall towards a good of little importance, on that is not confined to good people, but common to good and bad alike. Thus the sons of God were captivated by love for the daughters of men, and in order to enjoy them as wives, they abandoned the godly behavior they had maintained in the holy community, and lapsed into the morality of the earth-born society. Now physical beauty, to be sure, is a good created by God, but it is a temporal, carnal good, very low in the scale of goods, and if it is loved in preference to God, the eternal, internal, and sepraternal good, that love is wrong as miser's love of gold. That love is wrong. That love is as wrong as a miser's love of gold, with the abandonment of justice. Through the fault is in the man, though the fault is in the man, not in the gold. This is true of everything created. Though it is good, it can be loved in the right way or in the wrong way. And in the right way, that is, when the proper order is kept; in the wrong way, when that order is upset. This is how I can put the same thought in the same verse in praise of the paschal candle. It's a votive offering of prayer of thanksgiving. We're almost done. These are the gifts, they are good, for thou in thy goodness hast made them. Nothing in them is from us, save for sin when neglected of order. We fix our love in the creature instead of the creator. What happened?
Policy in America.
Why'd I get a beep? What's going on? Why'd I get a beep? But if the Creator is truly loved, that is, if he himself is loved and not something else in his stead, then he cannot be wrongly loved. We must, in fact, observe the right order even in our love for the very love with which we love what is deserving of love, so that there may be in us the virtue which is the condition of the good life. Hence, as it seems to me, a brief and true definition of virtue is rightly ordered love. That is why, in the holy Song of Songs, Christ's bride, the city of God, sings, "Set love in order in me." Thus it was because the order of love, that is, the attachment and affection, was distributed, that the sons of God defected from God in their affection for the daughters of men. These two descriptions are sufficient to show that the difference between the two cities. It is not that the sons of God were not sons of men by nature, but they began to have another name by virtue of grace. Indeed, in the same scriptural passage where the sons of God are said to have fallen in love with the daughters of men, they are also called angels of God. For this reason, many people suppose that they were not men but angels. So this is talking about, his interpretation of the seraphim, of the Nephilim and the falling angels, is that they're actually men. They're not actual angels. Let's not worry about that. As it relates to this story, though, as it relates to what's going on right now with JD Vance, the proper order of love is not to love gold or money or beautiful things, but to love God first, because love of beauty on its own is neither a good nor an evil. But if you love gold and you love money, which, again, wealth on its own is not evil, but if you love wealth above God or you love beauty above God, then you are doing an evil thing. That's what it's talking about when it's talking about the proper order of love. It is not talking about immigration policy. And it's not a way to justify doing evil. In fact, it's saying if you're using the love of God to do evil, then you aren't truly loving God. You're doing evil and loving evil. So JD Vance completely misses the point, and so does Cameron L. Bertuzzi. A-hole.
My duties to a single
That's his last
person
name.
hurting that might be like right in front of me, right within my proximity, is different than my duties to say like a million people across the world that need help. This parable does not suggest that nations have the same obligations to all people, regardless of citizenship or proximity. If JD Vance is right here, we should expect to find this principle throughout the Bible, not just in this one passage, right? His principle of ordered love. And guess what? That is exactly what we see. So let's look at some passages really quickly. All right, in Mark 12:30-31, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second, we're talking about the commandments here. The second commandment is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. All right, so there's a hierarchy. This passage, like it explicitly ranks love for God above love for neighbor. And this is what Christians have known forever, except maybe until recently, until someone started to point out that there's an order of our love. And then, everyone just starts losing their minds once you point something out. All right, let's look at a few more passages. This one is in 1 Timothy 5.
Again, that's not what Augustine is talking about. Augustine is saying, as this passage is saying, to love your neighbor is to love God when you want what's best for them. If you love your neighbor more than God, or if you love your neighbor in a way that is evil, that is wicked, such as lust, such as abuse, such as any of the wicked, twisted versions of love, such as the negations of love, then you are doing evil. You don't want their excellence. You don't want them to worship God. You want them to worship you, or you want them all to yourselves, and you don't want them to be shared with God. Cameron, you are an idiot. You should not be a famous YouTuber, but yet you will be and I won't be. And that's how it is.
4, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household, and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. Let us first learn to show godliness to their own household. And then verse 8 here, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives...
You're an idiot if you don't understand what that's saying, Cameron, and you clearly don't understand what that's saying.
And especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Interesting hierarchy you got going on here, Bible.
The Bible is absolutely correct. Cameron, you're a moron and a grifter. Please get off the internet.
All right, let's turn now to another passage in Galatians 6, verse 10. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith.
So Cameron Pertusi just declared himself a heretic. He no longer agrees with the Catholic bishops of America, nor the Catholic bishops at Rome, and he also disagrees with the Pope. Thank you, goodbye, good night. You are not a Catholic. Please take your Protestant card, get the hell out of here. Come back when you're ready to submit to your bishop and to the Pope. You have an indelible mark on your soul. Please obey it.
Faith. So we should prioritize fellow believers. According to the Bible, right? And so
most immigrants are Catholics, you moron.
But we may not like the Bible, and we may just want to have our own concept of what love looks like, which actually might be considered non-Christian as opposed to what some people are claiming. So let's be clear about this. JD was not making things up. He was not just saying things.
JD was wrong. He had a misinterpretation, and you're grifting and throwing red meat to him because you want that audience for yourself. You are a scumbag.
I think that it's pretty clear he was talking about Trump. He doesn't really see him as a Christian. It would say, for anybody who wants to say, well, no, I think you're taking him out of context. He didn't actually say that in relation to Trump. That's not what he was talking about. Appeal for people to build bridges of understanding, not walls, as he marked a feast day of a Sudanese immigrant amid a global uproar over the Trump administration's attempt to impose a travel ban on 7 mostly Muslim countries. The Pope didn't refer to Trump in his comments, but at the end of his audience, he noted that Wednesday marked both the church's day of reflection for young victims of human trafficking and coincidentally the feast of St. Josephine Bakhita. Now, he says, in the social and civil context as well, I appeal to not create walls, but to build bridges, he said, to not respond to evil with evil, to repeat evil with good, the offense with forgiveness. A Christian would never say, you will pay for that. Never. And so these were taken to be comments implying that Trump is not a Christian. And I will have to say, for anybody who wants to say, well, no, I think you're taking him out of context. He didn't actually say that in relation to Trump. That's not what he was talking about. Well, I'll just point out, he never came out and said, hey, no, I wasn't talking about Trump. But I do see him able to respond the same day of some controversies. For example, I've pointed this out before. Whenever he used a slur against homosexual people, there was a massive controversy in the news. And he apologized that very same day. So he got news of it that day and was able to respond that day and apologize. So it's not like he came out and said, hey, guys, actually, I wasn't talking about Trump. I was just speaking about blah, blah, blah. No, he didn't do that. So I think that it's pretty clear he was talking about Trump. He doesn't really see him as a Christian, it would seem. Now, let me point out a couple other things that some will often point to in this discussion, just for good measure, to give a balanced approach here. This is from Veritatis Splendor by John Paul II. So it's a pretty lengthy document. If you scroll down, however, to, let's see, it's about paragraph 80. Should be able to see it right around here. Notice what he says here. And he's talking in the context of acts that are intrinsically evil. Now, what intrinsically evil means is that, something is always wrong. It's always evil, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of who does it, it's always wrong. That's what intrinsically evil means. I don't know, just off the top of my head, disobeying God, would be an act that's intrinsically evil? Like, is there ever an occasion where it's okay to disobey God? Of course not. Okay, so I would say that's intrinsically evil. The church also says that, for instance, artificial contraception is intrinsically evil, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Well, in addition to those, it lists a few other things that are intrinsically evil. It says, the Second Vatican Council itself, in discussing the respect due to the human person, gives a number of examples of such. Whatever is hostile to life itself, such as any kind of homicide, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, involuntary suicide, whatever violates the integrity of the human person, such as mutilation, physical and mental torture, and attempts to coerce the spirit, whatever is offensive to human dignity, such as subhuman living conditions, arbitrary imprisonment, deportation, slavery, prostitution, and trafficking in women and children. So what we're seeing John Paul II doing here is putting in the category of what is intrinsically evil all of these things, and putting in deportation in the same context as slavery, prostitution, and trafficking of women. This is going to be ground zero in the debate. You know, what is he talking about here? Is he talking about all kinds of all acts of deportation? Is he talking about mass deportation? What exactly is being referred to here? And I've seen a lot of people debate the question. Well, actually, he's only talking about mass deportation, and others say, no, it's every single form of deportation, no exception, blah, 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 blah. This often comes up in the discussion, and I want to point it out to you because I suspect that this is in the back of a lot of people's minds, those at least who have read this document, and they want to criticize Trump and Vance's policies here on deportation. They'll probably point this out, and so it's just something to be aware of. Well, I also wanted to comment on JD Vance and some of his other positions. You know, a lot of people are saying, well, he's right on this. You know, he has a point on this. Well, if that's the case, I do want to still put into perspective some of his other views and ask if they are consistent with the Catholic position. Let me show you something else here. This is from an article, 13 Things to Know About JD Vance's Catholic Journey. And if you go to 13, it says Vance hasn't yet explained how his current position on abortion squares with his Catholic faith. And this might be a little confusing to people because wasn't he, you know, just speaking at a pro-life event and stuff like that? And he says he's pro-life. Okay, so let's put this in perspective. It says his tone shifted during a debate in October 2022 when he said he supported reasonable exceptions, including allowing a pregnant 10-year-old girl to have an abortion. So he takes the position that, you know, some of those exceptions to abortion, he's in favor of them. Now, again, keep in mind that Veritatis Splendor, Evangelium Vitae, and others are going to say that all abortion is just intrinsically evil. You can't even have exceptions. Now, JD Vance is saying, as a Catholic, he holds to these exceptions. In fact, there's a very quick video clip of that I want to show to you, just for good measure, so you know that the article is not making it up here. Let's take a look at it.
That is so far out of the mainstream, it's not even funny. Let me address that,
Let me go back to Mr. Vance to find out about this. You have said in the past that you compared abortion to slavery, even in the case of the 10-year-old Ohio girl that made headlines across the country. You said two wrongs don't make a right. It sounds tonight as if you're saying there are some exceptions I would accept. Can you specifically tell us what you might accept as an exception?
Look, I've always believed in reasonable exceptions. This is a misrepresentation of my view, but let's hear it from me, not from Congressman Ryan. I absolutely think the 10-year-old girl, the case that we've, of course, heard a lot about, an incredibly tragic situation. I mean, look, I've got a 9-year-old baby girl at home. I cannot imagine what that's like for the girl, for her family. God forbid something like that would happen. I have said repeatedly on the record that I think that girl should be able to get an abortion if she and her family so choose to do so.
Right. So clearly he holds to some exceptions on the question of abortion, but obviously that doesn't square with the Catholic Church and its complete prohibition and condemnation of abortion all around. And then also I'll point out his views on IVF are clearly not Catholic. And also he wants to say that people should have access to abortion pills. And that was very recently that he uttered that. And of course, I think he converted in 2018. So I've seen some people say, well, he's a brand new Catholic. Well, not exactly. Not exactly. Also, when you're a public figure, you're held to a higher level of accountability. So it's not something one can afford to be ignorant about if they are a public figure. And so, you know, I think that what's effectively going on here is I think that JD Vance is making some legitimate criticisms here. About how it seems that the USCCB is very quick to speak on this topic, but maybe not on others. I think he has a point there. Now, whether or not he's right in implying that the U.S. bishops are effectively just more concerned about the money that they receive than they are immigrants, that is something I don't know. I can't read hearts, right? It's possible. It's also possible that's not the case. Don't know. So I just kind of have to be agnostic on that particular one. But I do think that on the whole, he had some legitimate concerns and some legitimate constructive criticisms of the U.S. bishops. And I think there's, again, something to be said for his position there. And I appreciated the fact that he was willing to speak out. And I also share the same concern that I see the USCCB speaking out on some things very passionately and immediately, but then completely being negligent in other areas, perhaps areas that are more in focus to their job description, something that is more immediate to their job description, some things that they should be immediately handling, perhaps of a spiritual nature, such as heresy, schism, liberalism, all kinds of stuff in the pulpit that we hear in the United States. So again, I think there's something to be said there, but also there is something to be said about how the church does take a position against deportation, but then there's a debate on, is that every form of deportation? Is that mass deportation? I have to say it's probably, even though we see John Paul II not qualifying when he says deportation is intrinsically evil, it isn't relatively ambiguous here. I don't think he's talking about every kind and every single act of deportation. I think that's an unreasonable interpretation, even contextually. Not only that, but again, Pope Francis himself is in favor of, in some cases, deportation. And he's very outspoken against deportation, and yet he still says, okay, in some cases, you might need to send some of the people back. Right. I don't think that he would say that if the mind of the church is that deportation as a whole in every single situation is intrinsically evil. But I think what the church is trying to do is it's trying to address a real concern about not returning evil, not returning evil for evil, maybe turning the other cheek, if possible, insofar as it's possible, insofar as a country can do it. If a country can't do it, if it can't afford it, or if there are security concerns, then you might need to send someone back. But if the church, if the state can allow for a person to be regularized, even if they didn't get here in the right way, and they're not a threat and they will contribute to society, and the country can sustain it, then it would be wrong to just all of a sudden start deporting people in those cases.
So
I obviously think the case of the United States is much more complex than that, right? In some cases, you got very good people who came here and could be very constructive to society. That needs to be taken into consideration. In other cases, there's some really bad people who came here and are not going to be constructive to society and are a security risk. And that needs to be taken into consideration. So there's really some truth to, I think, both sides here. But I just have to, look, let's put that issue to the side. You know what I'm most bothered by? I'm very concerned by the fact that Pope Francis can immediately speak out on this. The U.S. bishops can immediately speak out on this, but they didn't do that with Biden and his perspective on abortion, and they haven't done that with all of the heretics in the Catholic Church. You rarely do you see the Pope or the bishops addressing those heretics and schismatics who are causing massive problems in the Catholic Church. Some of them have weaseled their way into the Capitol building recently and are beginning to influence very important politicians on Capitol Hill. And bishops aren't saying a thing about it. Not doing a word, or not saying a word, not doing a thing. That's concerning. And it shows me, okay, so they're very selective in what they're outraged by, very selective in what they criticize. And while I want to say, okay, these are areas that I do think that the Pope and bishops need to weigh in on. I think they need to take a very balanced perspective, maybe hear the other side a little bit more. Be that as it may, okay, I understand bishops wanting to comment on issues that impact society, sure. But aren't there some more important things going on right now in the Catholic Church that's a little bit more immediate to their job description that they should be addressing? And I'm talking about from Pope Francis to the USCCB. It seems to me that they need to clean their own house first before you start talking about the state. Clean up the church first. Then you're in a position to criticize the state. But I'll say this, nobody is going to take Pope Francis or the USCCB seriously when they criticize the state, when their own house isn't in order, when the Catholic Church right now is in absolute ruins and is a real big mess. It's absolutely on fire from all sorts of scandals, from sex abuse to heresy and schism fomenting in the clergy. Massive confusion, very poor catechesis, all sorts of people being led astray spiritually. I kind of feel like take care of that first, and then you'll have more credibility to speak on these issues concerning the government. But I just know society, they're not going to take Pope Francis or the Catholic bishop seriously until they address those issues, among others. That's my opinion.
Let's get
And
to
it seems
Gavin, and
be
then we'll be done for the night.
Also based on just an analysis of looking at numerous comments and feedback from people in the comment section and videos and stuff like that.
This will be the last one, and then we'll close out.
There's been discussion lately on social media about JD Vance's comments about the Ordo Amoris, or the Order of Love. And in this video, I want to make 3 quick points about this discussion. These are very modest, but hopefully they could be useful. Actually, the third one is the one that's most on my heart. Number 1, the Ordo Amoris is a historic Christian principle. A classic affirmation of this can be found in Augustine. He says, "You are to pay special regard to those who, by the accidents of time or place or circumstance, are brought into closer connection with you." And when you stop to think about what Augustine is saying here, I think Augustine sometimes is misconstrued as though he's saying that's how it normally is, but there's a higher order or something. I don't think so. I think that sentence taken at face value is what he's commending. And it does seem, unless you take this in a deliberately bad light, this does seem basically like common sense, you know. It also seems to be biblical. You see in the scripture commandments to provide for our own household, and that each household should care for their own before the church does. You also see a special obligation to other relationships, parents, of course, in the 10 Commandments. There's a special obligation to fellow church members in many New Testament passages. We're going to come back to that. That's actually really important. Now, the rationale for ordered love is not that some people are intrinsically more valuable or more worthy of that love than others or something like that. That is not the idea. Everyone is made in God's image. Everyone deserves our love and service. Rather, it has to do with pragmatic considerations stemming out of our finitude. Basically, different relationships result in different kinds of obligations. Here's how Thomas Aquinas puts it. One's obligation to love a person is proportionate to the gravity of the sin one commits in acting against that love. And then, as you can see here, he fleshes this out again with our parents as a special example. Yeah, it's worth saying that this is a pretty common idea and pretty basic throughout the Christian tradition, including among more recent Christians like C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man. Here's a passage from John Calvin, which affirms this, even while he is very clear to sort of qualify it with a statement against any sort of prejudice for one kind of person versus another. That's actually a helpful quote from Calvin there. Now, I'm going to get to the parable of the Good Samaritan in a second, if that's where you're worried about. But I do think there's a real danger of just many Christians today maybe failing to appreciate this body of thought and this sort of background context, biblically, historically, and in terms of just rational reflection on how do we best love our neighbor? What does that look like today when there's people on the other side of the world that I have a very different relationship with than the people right next to me, and so on and so forth. However, that is not to say that this idea is always agreed upon in terms of how it should be deployed. So this afternoon, I'm reading through a lot of Thomas Aquinas on how he treats this. And there's things that he says that many of us would disagree with today, like his idea that we should love our father more than our mother in a certain sense. I love Thomas Aquinas and learn so much from him. If you know me, I'm sort of a Thomist in my doctrine of God. But nonetheless, it's okay to admit he's not perfect, and he's not God, and not everything he says is sort of untouchable and so forth. So the basic idea here is very biblical and classical and a Christian idea. Where this starts to get really complicated is when we widen out from the relationships in Scripture that are very clear, say our relationship with our biological family, and then we're extending outwards in concentric circles to relationships where Scripture is less clear, maybe along geographical boundaries or national boundaries and so on and so forth. And this leads to a second point, and that is the Ordo Amoris can be easily misused. Now, there is so much we could get into. We could talk so much about this. I'm really going to not get into the more controversial aspects of this discussion. That's not really the purpose of this video. This video is more basic sort of Christian reflection, devotional reflection on this. As I've been searching my own conscience, what does this look like? How do we love our neighbor? It's really complicated to think through some of these questions. It is a little nuanced. Some of the basic things we can say is, number one, God should be first in the order of love. That actually needs to be emphasized. And actually, there's so much to say that we can't assume that. Okay, we love God first. A second thing is the relationship that we have with other Christians, especially those who are members of our local church. That there's a special kind of priority upon that family of relationships in the New Testament. Another biblical category is care for the sojourner or foreigner in our midst. That one gets controversial because if you just quote verses out of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, it sounds more kind of liberal to modern ears, but it's a very biblical motif. Now, it's not easy to apply that today. I'm not acting like we just take those verses and it's easy to see exactly what they would mean for like contemporary immigration policy and so on and so forth. I'm not going there. That's complicated. But if we want to get a biblical framework for this idea, a Christian framework, these are things that weren't necessarily reflected in JD Vance's comments. His comments came in a certain context. He's talking about, illegal immigrants who have a criminal history and this kind of thing. So he's really looking at one particular problem and sort of reflecting off the cuff. But if we're thinking about this as followers of Jesus and we want to get like good theological categories for what this idea means, these are the kinds of things we need to come in and talk about, like the priority for loving other Christians in your local church, the first priority of God, a principle of care for the sojourner, and so on and so forth. But here I just want to make one basic point. So even all that is more than I want to get into here. I'm making a basic point in this video and inviting others to think about it with me. And I'll start with this Augustine passage with what I've emboldened here first. He says, all men are to be loved equally. Now that's already quite a striking statement. That is more than some might say today. But note the rationale then in the next sentence for why we have an order of love. But since you cannot do good to all. Okay, so the reason we have ordered loves is a practical impossibility of loving everybody. It's not that, like, you know, some people are more important or something like this. Augustine then fleshes out this imaginary scenario that with a part that I underlined on the screen there, and he's basically saying if you have like a lot of resources, like a lot of food or something like that, and you want to give it away, and you can only give it to one person, then basically you're going to draw straws or roll the dice or pick a number to try to figure out, well, who do I give it to? If neither of the two people you can give it to has a greater claim upon you or a greater need, then you're just going to try to find someone to give it to, because giving it to one person is better than none. And Augustine is saying that's how it is with us. Insofar as I'm trying to meet the need of my neighbor rather than someone who lives in Indonesia, it's because by the lot of life, I happen to live here. And so there's a practical necessity to meet the needs that I can actually meet, not the ones way far away. And so the simple point I want to underscore is this: the logic of this passage assumes we should try to maximize well-doing in our lives, not restrict it. And so I want to put out this basic thought that I've been reflecting upon that's probably healthy for us as followers of Christ to think about, and that is we need to be careful not to misuse the principle of the order of love so as to fall short in our obligation for neighbor love. And it is easy to do this. Here's another passage in Thomas that really struck me as I was reading today. He's quoting Augustine approvingly, who says we ought to love our neighbor more than our own body. Think about that. Do I do that? Do we do this? Do we love our neighbor more than our very flesh?
Yeah, just to be very clear, so the order is to love your enemy before you love your family, to love your neighbor before you love, to love your enemy before you love your neighbor, to love your neighbor before you love your family, and to love your family before you love yourself, and to love God above all. That's the correct order.
Sometimes in the midst of our debates, and I'm going to come back to this again when I talk about the way these discussions happen in the body of Christ, we forget to sort of we're defending the truth, and we forget to be humbled under the truth. The truth becomes a club to fight the enemy over there, and we forget to think we should be just on our faces in repentance before God for how hard this is and how much we're going to need his grace. So in other words, we should never think, well, there's an order of love. My obligations are greater toward my next door neighbor and my family and my church and so forth. Therefore, I don't really need to worry about making costly sacrifices to care for those who are far away. Or I can just kind of focus on the people that I'm more comfortable with versus those that I'm not. No. And this is where the parable of the Good Samaritan, I think, does come in. Now, there's an old Latin saying that says, abusus usus non tollit. That means abuse does not take away the proper use. The fact that this parable is sometimes employed too ambitiously does not mean we should fail to be humbled and corrected by our Lord's words in this parable.
Yeah,
this parable does seem to...
I know. Dan has fallen and Gavin has risen in his place. Gavin's doing this perfectly. Gavin's saying everything correct. He's getting it the most right, I think, of everyone. You heard me read it. I read the passage. I read the actual passage they're talking about, not the thing that, I don't know, Bertuzzi was talking about.
Designed to challenge and disrupt our categories of relationships. It does seem that our Lord is trying to confront an attitude that says, oh, I don't have to care about that person. Because the parable is told to a lawyer who's asking, who is my neighbor? And his motive is to justify himself. And Jesus does say that to be a good neighbor requires us to cross boundaries and basically act contrary to human custom and expectation. And we are very naive if we think our own hearts will never be tempted to forms of prejudice like that. When we understand our Lord's commandments, they leave no room for a smug correction of others. Sometimes there may be correction and contending for the truth and so forth, but it comes in this larger reality of, look what Christ calls me to, and happy thought, look what Christ has done for me. Of course, this takes us to the heart of the gospel itself, where God extended love when we were not close to him. We were the furthest away. This is the gospel message. You know, Jesus came to die for us when we had not taken a step toward God. Think of it like this. If you remember, I was the one who was most distant from heaven, and Jesus came for me. And that's really in your heart. That doesn't mean that you're going to, that being in your heart isn't going to solve all of these conversations today, and it isn't going to remove the need to contend for the truth in this way or that way. Nonetheless, it's going to cause us to approach these conversations with a lot more compassion, which actually is really needed right now.
Exactly.
Third point, and this stems out of that, and that's applying the Ordo Amoris to contemporary geopolitics is complicated. These are Christian principles. applying them to politics in an increasingly polarized world is very difficult. Augustine and Thomas are not talking about immigration policy per se, particularly in a very complicated 21st century world where technology has changed various things. And so I'm making one simple point from this. It's okay for us to not have all the answers on this stuff. As I watch, and this is actually the main thing I wanted to say, why I wanted to make this video. If anybody out there, tell me in the comments. Sometimes I put out videos and I'm like, are they listening? I don't know, because they're talking about other stuff in the comments. I get it. I do the same thing. But tell me if you think I'm off base with this. I mean, I really see this. The way we have disagreements, here's what in the body of Christ is really unfortunate right now. We are just tearing each other's heads off too much. And I understand there are some really toxic voices out there in different camps that need to be corrected, but social media is amplifying those voices. And it is causing us to
Gavin's
think.
doing great here.
It trains us to think. The people
I wish
on the other
his
side
book was better because he's doing so great here.
Are evil. They are the problem. And if I can just destroy their position, then we win. And there is a place for contending against false ideas and so forth. But the way it's happening on social media right now has some real toxic elements to it. And too often the body of Christ, we just get sucked right into the way the algorithms are using us and appealing to our outrage and so on and so forth. Our responsibility of loving our neighbor is probably not going to be well served if our whole energy and our whole thought process is, look how dumb and evil the people are on the other side who disagree with me. Maybe there is evil out there, but one thing I've been thinking about, maybe we just need to ignore. How do we do this? How do we ignore the bad faith voices more and focus on the good faith voices? That's so.
I like that idea, but sometimes you're bad faith, Gavin. So I wouldn't be able to watch your channel all the time. I'd have to just guess.
Hard to do. It's hard to ignore people, and you can't always. Again, it's complicated because you may be a pastor and there's people in your church who are influenced by this very toxic person out there, and so you may realize, I need to speak to this. You know, that happens. Nonetheless, in the ordinary course of things, are there ways we can?
Yeah, the church is going to have to settle the issue of whether or not Gavin Ortlund is a good apologist or a bad apologist, not whether or not he's Catholic or not. We need the church to make a decision on whether or not we can accept his Protestant apologetics.
Can try to have disagreements in a more healthy way in the body of Christ. This is
useful.
You know, here's what happens. A storm comes up, some clip just goes shooting out and it goes viral and everybody's commenting on it. And then it's like piranhas just going in, and the net result is a lot more heat than light. And I understand, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of the issue. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't argue for the truth and so on and so forth, but just the way it plays out on social media is not healthy right now. So we've got to work at this. So that's just an ongoing thing. We got to figure this out. We have got to figure out as the church how to have disagreements and how to talk through contemporary issues in a way where we're not playing into the worst tendencies of human nature that social media is making money off of. I wrote a book. It's coming out this month. It's called The Art of Disagreeing. I don't mean to make it the final point of this video, but I'll just say this because I do think so. This is what it looks like. Good Book Company did a great job. I kind of like this simple cover. I don't know if you can see it at all. The subtitle here is How to Keep Calm and Stay Friends in Hard Conversations. It's a humbling book to read.
All right, okay. He's doing a book quote. All right, we're done. We've fixed the audio issues. We've done everything we're supposed to do. I got to get rid of these little two things on the bottom. It doesn't matter. Everyone, good night. See you Monday.
Adrenaline, no pain. Welcome all to my domain. Yeah. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up. I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you. I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up. I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you. I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up. I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you. I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never.